Chapter 1450 City of Crafters. Chapter 1450 City of Crafters. Chapter 1450 City of Crafters. Cold Wind City, Trade Area. Commander, more people are tailing us now. Matchless families probably found out about our return already. Should we notify Big Brother Yi Feng about? Yang Ya asked worriedly as she glanced at the players stalking them. News of the slaughter of Matchless family's members had already spread throughout the city. Yet, now, the main culprit boldly walked down the city streets without a care in the world. It was a slap in the face to the guild. Once the Matchless family's members arrived, they would not leave without a fight. Thousands of players from Matchless City resided in the city. Killing a single player would be child's play for the guild. Furthermore, their group still had the soul lock debuff. Solitary 9 nodded in response to Yang Ya's question. Based on his understanding of Matchless family, the guild would seek revenge for the smallest of grievances. It wouldn't hesitate to take action against Shifeng even in the city. Although he trusted in Shifeng's strength, Matchless family had the home ground advantage. Regardless of how powerful the man was, he was at a disadvantage. Solitary 9 walked up to Shifeng and whispered, "Brother Yi Feng, why don't we head to the library? I'm afraid that if we linger around here any longer, Matchless family's members will find us. Dealing with them will be troublesome." Troublesome? Curious, Shifeng asked, "Do players have full power over the city?" Solitary 9 hadn't gone into the management style in the Ice Crystal World's NPC cities. If these cities were like the Dark Den's shelters, where players had full authority to determine a city's rules, they would indeed have some trouble to deal with. That's not the case. Matchless family just has a lot of members inside the city, Solitary 9 said, shaking his head. Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Solitary 9's reply. He then pointed at the Cold Wind auction house a short distance away and said, "That's all right, then. I've already visited most of the shops, so let's make a trip to the auction house before we head to the library." This, Solitary 9 was speechless. The man even wondered if Shifeng understood what he meant by a lot of members. Cold Wind City was the Matchless family's main headquarters. The guild could easily gather over 10,000 players at a moment's notice. Centurion Dynasty was the only existence capable of contending with the guild in the city. "Commander, what should we?" "Forget it. We'll just accompany him until the end. Hopefully, Thundering Sky can keep his cool and avoid doing anything rash." As Solitary 9 watched Shifeng leisurely approach the auction house, he struggled with various complex feelings. He could not understand what was going through Shifeng's mind. However, since Shifeng had saved his and his teammates' lives, he could not escape by himself. He could only pray that Matchless family did not do anything too reckless. After all, they were currently standing in the heart of the city. Patrolling NPC guards were everywhere. If it really came down to a fight, Matchless family would not have too much of an advantage, either. Upon entering the auction house's main hall, the sight of players hawking their items greeted Shifeng. Selling cheap, top-tier level 40 fine gold weapons. 10 gold per item. Get a 5% discount if you buy 2. Selling refined meteorite copper for 3 gold per stack. Selling frost steel ore for 1 gold per stack. The players selling items in the hall outnumbered the shopping players. The items these players were selling shocked Shifeng. On the God's Domain continent, even the cheapest level 40 fine gold weapon could sell for 15 gold or more, yet players here were offering the same for 10 gold each. Moreover, they were all player-made weapons. With how high current demand was for level 40 fine gold weapons in his world, he could easily turn a massive profit if he bought and resold these player-made weapons. As for the refined meteor copper, the rare forging material currently sold for 30 silver per ingot. Moreover, it was very difficult to purchase. Each stack, containing 20 ingots, sold for 6 gold, yet these players were selling each stack for half that. The various forging materials sold in the hall were all significantly cheaper than those in God's Domain. In addition, this world had an abundance of forging resources. Even empires famous for producing ores paled in comparison to the Ice Crystal world. This place is really impressive. It's a pity that I don't have a way to return once I leave. I guess I have no choice but to stock up on rare materials before I depart. Shi Feng sighed ruefully as he looked through the various items these players offered. If he could travel between the Ice Crystal World and the God's Domain continent, he could earn more income from reselling items than what he earned from Stone Forest Town. Moreover, he could rely on the large quantity of materials to nurture the candlelight trading firm's forgers. If luck would have it, he might nurture a few master forgers. After all, creating new items required experimentation with various materials. With so many rare materials in the Ice Crystal World, one could experiment to their heart's content. This was most likely the reason that the standard of Cold Wind City's forgers was far above those in the candlelight trading firm. Based on Solitary Nine's explanation, the Ice Crystal World should have other NPC cities. As players reached higher levels, Cold Wind City's guilds began to prepare to challenge the Snow Rift. It was only a matter of time before Cold Wind City's players encountered cities in other regions. At this point, Shi Feng suspected that the Ice Crystal World had birthed the game's first master forger. However, purchasing a large amount of materials required a lot of coins, but he hadn't been carrying many when he had come to the Ice Crystal World. His only option was to make money by selling the Matchless family's secret silver and fine gold items for a low price. Unfortunately, the dark gold items were precious to Zero Wing, so Shi Feng intended to hold on to them for now. After Shi Feng finished putting the loot from Matchless family up for sale, he left the auction house and made his way to the library. Seeing Shi Feng finally willing to leave this risky location, Solitary Nine and the others breathed a sigh of relief. However, as soon as they left the auction house, they were greeted by a shocking scene. Players crowded the street, and every one of them wore Matchless family's guild emblem. With a rough glance, they easily counted over 10,000 players. Matchless family's members radiated killing intent as they glared at Shi Feng's group, scaring off any unrelated players. What's going on? Does Matchless family plan to monopolize the auction house? You don't know? Some expert killed a bunch of their members. They've come to deal with him. Do they need to go to such lengths, though? Why would the dispatch so many people just for one player? The domineering display frightened the independent players on the street. Among the Matchless family members present, the lowest-leveled member was level 43. Their equipment was awe-inspiring, as well. Has the Matchless family lost its mind? Solitary Nine felt an unprecedented pressure. He had thought that, at most, Matchless family would send around 1,000 experts. He hadn't expected Thundering Sky to be mad enough to dispatch a 10,000-man army. Not even Lifeless Thorn, Cold Wind City's #1 expert, could elicit such a reaction. However, after Matchless family's members had gathered in front of the auction house, another commotion shook the street. Another player army slowly approached from the other end of the street, and although this army was smaller than Matchless family's, it still included around 3,000 players. These new arrivals wore Centurion Dynasty's guild emblem. For a time, experts from both of Cold Wind City's large guilds stood before the auction house's entrance. Following which, both guilds' leaders pulled away from the crowd. Both men looked at Shi Feng. "You're the expert that killed Featherwind?" Thundering Sky and Sky Slicer asked in almost perfect unison. The spectating players were stupefied. Chapter 1451 Obliterated. Chapter 1451 Obliterated. Chapter 1451 Obliterated. That guy is so amazing. Both guild leaders actually came looking for him. Just who is he? The distant spectating players were shocked to see the two men. Solitary Nine, who stood behind Shi Feng, was at a loss for words. Both Thundering Sky and Sky Slicer were top-tier existences in Cold Wind City. Normally, they were very difficult to meet, yet these two had gathered here due to Shi Feng. "That's right. What business do you have with me?" Shi Feng calmly replied to the guild leader's question. An army of 10,000 players might be shocking to ordinary players, but not even a million-player army could surprise Shi Feng. Besides, they were still inside an NPC city. Good. I never thought you would have the guts to admit it. Thundering Sky's face twitched in anger as he glared at Shi Feng's calm composure. "I am Thundering Sky, the guild leader of Matchless family. Since you admitted to killing my guild's experts, that makes things simple. Hand over every item and piece of equipment you have and let me kill you once, then we'll consider the matter settled. Otherwise, bear the consequences at your own risk. Guild leader, aren't you letting this brat off too lightly? The guild leader's demand confused his upper echelons. They had assumed that Thundering Sky wouldn't rest until he forced this newcomer to delete his account. He had just offered to let Shifeng off with such a light punishment. Enough. I have my reasons. Thundering Sky shot his subordinates a withering glare, immediately silencing them. What these guild upper echelons did not know was that Thundering Sky was far more interested in Shifeng's weapons and equipment than he was in avenging Featherwind. After watching the swordsman's battle video, he realized that the man's basic attributes were ridiculously high. Not even Thundering Sky was confident of killing Featherwind in one hit. After all, Featherwind's weapons and equipment were considerably good. The Elementalist's HP was also over 30,000. PvP battles were different from those with monsters. A player's damage would scale down when they struck another player. Killing expert players of the same level was very difficult. Yet, Shifeng had done it. Moreover, he had thrown level 44 and 45 shield warriors with his normal attacks. His strength could definitely rival that of a great lord of the same level. With such powerful attributes, Shifeng had to have more than one top-tier weapon or piece of equipment. He might even have something Thundering Sky could use. However, if they killed this man while the Soul Lock debuff was active, Shifeng would only drop a few pieces of equipment. On the off chance that he had stored his items in the bank, they would lose any chance of obtaining them. Ha ha ha. Fellow friend, ignore this man's foolish demand. If you join Centurion Dynasty, I guarantee that no harm will come to you within the Cold Wind City region, Sky Slicer said as he sent a contemptuous glance at Thundering Sky before turning back to Shifeng. In addition, I'd like to offer you the position as our guild's main force vice commander. Insane. This is madness. I didn't hear wrong, right? Sky Slicer actually offered so much to an unknown expert. They haven't even been that generous to Lifeless Thorn. Sky Slicer's voice had been quite loud, so the spectating crowd had heard every word. The offer confused them. A guild's main force was a guild's core of power. The main force generally only answered to the guild leader. Not even vice-guild leaders had the authority to mobilize the main force. Hence, the main force's commander was even more important than the vice-guild leader. Although the vice-commander wasn't as important, it was still a crucial role. Sky Slicer had offered Shifeng such an important position right off the bat. Slicer, do you intend to make an enemy of Matchless family? Thundering Sky shouted, enraged. Although he had expected Sky Slicer to oppose him, he hadn't expected the man to be so brazen about it. Have our guilds ever been friendly? Sky Slicer sneered. Their two guilds had fought countless battles against each other, and neither feared their rival. Now that he had an opportunity to suppress his rival's momentum and recruit a powerful expert, he couldn't miss the chance to kill two birds with one stone. Good. I'll take care of your Centurion Dynasty as well. Thundering Sky's expression darkened. Immediately, he commanded, everyone, attack. Yes. Let's see who is afraid of whom. Sky Slicer also commanded his guild members to fight. For a time, the Matchless family and Centurion Dynasty's members slaughtered each other inside the city. Due to so many players involved, the NPC patrols couldn't quell the incident quickly. They could only clear out the fighting players, little by little. Both guilds' members fought with everything they had, fully intent on annihilating their enemy. Now that players were reaching higher levels, it was only a matter of time before they could raid the Snow Rift. To compete with guilds in other NPC cities, they first needed to deal with Cold Wind City's problems. Otherwise, they would have to face enemies on both fronts. The entire street had transformed into a battlefield. Spells and arrows blotted out the sky, and explosions and screams filled the air. Unfortunately, as Centurion Dynasty had brought fewer members, Matchless family quickly suppressed its players. As a result, the former guild's members were forced to retreat. Of course, Matchless family couldn't eliminate their rivals' members as Centurion Dynasty's reinforcements began to arrive. All Matchless family could do was push the other guild back. Shortly after the battle had begun, the dead players' weapons and equipment littered the street. Even experts were forced to use their life-saving skills. The weaker players died before they could even react as numerous attacks struck. The spectators were stunned. This fight helped them realize just how weak an individual was compared to a guild. Even the well-known adventurer teams were nothing. Very quickly, Sky Slicer was forced into a corner. Meanwhile, Matchless family's members surrounded the auction house. HMPH. Do you think that we can't touch you just because Centurion Dynasty wants to lend a helping hand? Thundering Sky sneered at Shifeng, who had not participated in the battle. I guarantee you that no one can protect you in the Cold Wind City region. If you hand over all of your weapons and equipment now, I can still let you off the hook. If you try to retaliate, I'll eliminate you, Solitary 9, and his group hiding behind you. The watching crowd gasped when they heard Thundering Sky's threat. They all knew that Thundering Sky was a man of his word, but they hadn't expected him to be ruthless enough to target Solitary 9's group as well. However, as soon as Thundering Sky finished speaking, Shifeng, who had maintained a relaxed posture, unsheathed Killing Ray. He then casually walked towards Thundering Sky, who stood 50 yards away from him, as if he were just taking a stroll through his own backyard. What? He actually dares to defy Thundering Sky? Is he insane? Even Matchless family's members were stunned. Setting aside Thundering Sky's individual prowess, the man was surrounded by hundreds of his experts. These subordinates would likely kill the swordsman before he got close to their guild leader. You asked for this. Thundering Sky frowned. He hadn't thought this newcomer would be so foolish. He gestured with a hand and ordered, "Kill him." The instant Shifeng was within the ranged player's reach, over 100 spells and arrows flew towards him, forming a tight wall that left no room for Shifeng to dodge. However, Shifeng raised the sacred sword and swung it forward. Lightning edge. Suddenly, countless arcs of blue lightning streaked towards the incoming spells and arrows. In the blink of an eye, the lightning destroyed everything in a 50-yard cone. I am only one person. However, you can't just kill me because you want to, Shifeng calmly stated as he watched Thundering Sky and his numerous subordinates transform into particles of white light. Chapter 1452 Overwhelming Difference. Chapter 1452 Overwhelming Difference. Chapter 1452 Overwhelming Difference. Silence. It seemed as if time had stopped. The fighting players from both guilds froze as they stared at the particles of light that had once been Thundering Sky and his subordinates. All of a sudden, a large, empty space had opened on the crowded street. Even now, faint arcs of electricity flickered around the clearing. In a single move, Shifeng had killed hundreds of Matchless family's players. Thundering Sky, who ranked among Cold Wind City's top 10 players, had died before their eyes. He hadn't even put up the slightest fight before he had died. It was hard to believe that an ordinary-looking swordsman with a blue longsword had been responsible for this. When Solitary 9 and the others, who stood behind Shifeng, saw this, they could not help but gasp, the corners of their lips twitching slightly. They already knew that Shifeng was very powerful, but it now seemed that Shifeng hadn't taken his fight with Featherwind seriously. Just who is this guy? The corners of Sky Slicer's eyes twitched as he stared at the empty clearing a short distance away. He wouldn't have been so surprised if Shifeng had been a magical class player. However, this was the first time he had seen a swordsman in God's domain possessing such a powerful skill. Moreover, this skill had such a short channeling time, giving the skill's targets no time to react. How is this possible? The guild leader died. Matchless family's members were at a loss. Everything had happened too quickly. He killed our guild leader. We can't let him get away. That skill must have a long cooldown. He can't use it again anytime soon. Kill him. Suddenly, Matchless family's members turned their attention away from Centurion Dynasty as they charged at Shifeng. A guild leader was directly connected to the guild's reputation. The fact that this man had killed their guild leader instantly humiliated every one of them. If they did not kill Shifeng right now, Matchless family's reputation would suffer. This would severely impact their guild's development. Damn it. Matchless Family's players have lost their mind. Tension gripped Solitary 9 as he watched the players swarm towards him. However, before the Matchless Family's members reached their group, Shifeng pointed Killing Ray at the approaching crowd. Dragon Breath. Suddenly, a beam of white light shot forth. The white light vaporized any player it touched. In the blink of an eye, several hundred more players had died. After using Dragon Breath, Shifeng followed up with Dragon's Authority, inflicting the fear debuff on all enemies within a 50-yard radius, reducing their movement speed and attack speed by 40% for 1 minute. Everyone within the skill's range felt as if they had plunged into a muddy swamp. Following which, Shifeng activated Defensive Blade, increasing his attack range. He then took a step forward and vanished. Where is he? As the crowd recovered from the shock and fear Shifeng's Dragon Breath had inflicted, the man had disappeared. They could not help their growing confusion. However, before anyone had realized it, Shifeng had reappeared among Matchless Family's members. He lightly swung his 2 swords at the nearby enemies. Boom! A tornado formed around Shifeng. Following which, all players within 15 yards of Shifeng collapsed, staring at their empty HP bars in a daze. Not even the MTS with high HP had escaped Shifeng's wrath. Following which, Shifeng advanced once again. This time, however, he didn't execute void steps. Instead, he left numerous afterimages trailing behind him as he moved forward. At the same time, he brandished his swords without a care in the world, slaughtering every player that came within 15 yards. None of the players within his range escaped death's embrace. In fact, they couldn't even block or dodge the swordsman's attacks. One after another, Matchless Family's members transformed into particles of light. Shifeng looked like a god of death as he claimed these players' lives. Nobody could even slow him down. Although the guild's ranged players tried to stop Shifeng, their attempts were little more than a joke. They couldn't even keep up with Shifeng's movements with their eyes, much less land an attack. They could only watch as particles of light floated in the air. He can't be a player, he must be a demon in disguise. He's a monster. A monster in human skin. We need to run. After a brief moment, Shifeng had killed another several hundred players. Panic overwhelmed Matchless Family members as they watched Shifeng reap their allies' lives. At this point, they had forgotten about avenging their guild leader and restoring their guild's reputation. They could only think of getting as far away from Shifeng as possible. They had never seen such a terrifying player before. Compared to Shifeng, the strongest boss monster they had ever faced looked cute. After all, they had some hope of damaging a boss. Against Shifeng, however, they couldn't even resist. How was this supposed to be a PvP battle? This was just a one-sided massacre. Like frightened rats, the thousands of Matchless Family members scattered and fled in all directions. The players watching from a safe distance were stupefied. Before today, they had seen thousands of players pursue a single person. They had never watched one player chase after a 10,000-man army. This scene had shattered everything they had thought they knew about God's domain. Isn't he a little too strong? Just who is he? Solitary 9 was beyond shocked. An individual having the power to suppress an entire guild only ever happened in his dreams, yet he watched as that dream became a reality. What Solitary 9 did not know was that, while Coldwind City's players might be stronger than those in God's domain as forgers, their weapons and equipment were nothing in comparison. To prove this point, not one player from Matchless Family dropped an epic weapon or piece of equipment. The best they had was level 40 dark gold equipment. On the other hand, Shifeng wielded 3 fragmented legendary items. He was also a tier 2 player. With both advantages, the difference between Shifeng and his opponents was horrifying. As the other players from Aurora Sword watched Shifeng's massacre, an indescribable excitement bloomed in their chests. They were fully aware that Shifeng was a player. They fully intended to boast to their friends that they had met such a powerful expert. After around 30 seconds, the originally clogged street was empty of players. Only Shifeng and a bunch of weapons and equipment remained. The survivors from Matchless Family had long since fled the battlefield. Despite so many items covering the street, none of the spectators moved forward to steam them. On the contrary, they distanced themselves from the loot, making sure that at least 100 yards lay between them and the nearest item. As for the NPC guards, they spared Shifeng little more than a glance before pursuing Matchless Family's surviving members. In NPC cities, the NPC guards would target the side that attacked first. Matchless Family members had teamed up before surrounding Shifeng. If any member of the team attacked, they would implicate the entire team in the crime. Hence, within a fixed amount of time, Shifeng could kill as many members of the team as he wanted without receiving any punishment from the system. Even if this mechanic hadn't existed, Shifeng could have simply found a secluded location and altered his appearance with the demon mask. With Nightwalker Cape's passive concealment effect, not even high-tiered NPC guards could touch him. After crushing Matchless Family members, Shifeng didn't hurry to collect his loot. Instead, he smiled as he turned to Sky Slicer, who stood a short distance away, saying, "Guild Leader Slicer, now that the problem has been dealt with, may I know what business you have with me?" Chapter 1453, Unexpected Harvest. Chapter 1453, Unexpected Harvest. Chapter 1453, Unexpected Harvest. As Centurion Dynasty's members watched Shifeng walk towards them, their breath caught, and cold sweat drenched their backs. It felt as if a prehistoric beast approached, not a player, and they desperately wanted to turn and flee. One man had inspired thousands of Matchless Family's members to run like frightened rats. If someone had told them of such a thing happening in the past, they would have laughed it off. Now, however, they could not find it in themselves to laugh. They had clashed with the other guild many times, and both were roughly on the same level. Since Shifeng could suppress Matchless Family by himself, naturally, he wouldn't have any issues doing so to Centurion Dynasty. Sky Slicer wore an ugly expression. Had he known something like this would happen, he would not have poked his nose into the situation. "Brother Expert, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I only came here to recruit you because I have a grudge against Matchless Family. If I had known that Brother Expert was so powerful, I would not have meddled in your affairs. For this offense, I am willing to pay 10,000 magic crystals as compensation," Sky Slicer respectfully told Shifeng. His previous pride had faded like smoke. "What a generous offer," Solitary 9 quietly exclaimed. In his opinion, Sky Slicer was insane to offer 10,000 magic crystals as an apology. Even a well-known adventurer team like Aurora Sword had only accumulated 2,000 magic crystals thus far. Meanwhile, magic crystals were an indispensable resource in Coldwind City. For example, lifestyle players needed the crystals when producing weapons and equipment. To increase their production success rate, they would spend magic crystals on renting special workshops in their respective lifestyle associations. There was also the Divine Colosseum, and training there cost a lot of crystals. Magic crystals were nearly impossible to save. Although there were quite a few ways to obtain magic crystals in Coldwind City, handing over 10,000 magic crystals would deal a considerably painful blow to Centurion Dynasty. However, Solitary 9 wasn't a guild leader, so he couldn't understand Sky Slicer's thought process. If an expert of Shifeng's caliber decided to target Centurion Dynasty and randomly ambush its main force or elite members, the guild would break under the loss. Moreover, Centurion Dynasty couldn't do anything to Shifeng. If such a situation lasted for a long time, it could cripple the guild. The 10,000 magic crystal offer also served to put some distance between Centurion Dynasty and Shifeng. 10,000 magic crystals? Shifeng was slightly confused. The resources in Coldwind City were far more abundant than he had assumed. Both Centurion Dynasty and Matchless Family would only be third-rate guilds on God's Domain's continent. Giving away 10,000 magic crystals would likely bankrupt the guild. However, based on Sky Slicer's expression, he only felt a slight pang at the loss. When the guild leader saw the small frown forming on Shifeng's face, he realized that the other party wasn't particularly satisfied with the compensation. Gritting his teeth, he said, "If Brother Expert doesn't find the compensation satisfying, I can include this map as well?" Saying so, Sky Slicer took out an ancient, tattered animal skin. Although the hide was quite old, it emitted a faint pressure. Although there was only a trace of this pressure, everyone seemed to fear it. "This is divine might." Shifeng stared at the animal hide in Sky Slicer's hands in surprise. Divine might was an aura unique to gods. Any item that radiated the energy wouldn't be ordinary. Furthermore, this item had manifested in the ice crystal world. Although this otherworld's rank was quite high, it could only accommodate up to Tier 5 creatures. Tier 6 gods were barred from this world. The fact that such an item, once used by God, had manifested here made it even more valuable. Brother expert, what do you think? Sky Slicer asked, smiling when he saw Shifeng's interest in the animal hide. He had obtained this animal hide some time ago, but although he recognized it as valuable, he had no way to reveal its secrets. Using it to appease Shifeng and improve his relationship with the man wasn't a bad trade. Deal. Shifeng nodded. His goal in traveling to the ice crystal world was to obtain eternal ice crystals, not to dominate Cold Wind City. He had no reason to clash with the local guilds. If not for Matchless Family's determination to pick a fight, he wouldn't have bothered with them. Hearing Shifeng's reply, Sky Slicer breathed a sigh of relief. He then handed over the 10,000 magic crystals and the animal hide. As for the weapons and equipment littering the street, Shifeng decided to sell the items to Sky Slicer for coins and various rare materials. Weapons and equipment took up an entire slot by themselves in a player's bag space. However, materials didn't. One slot could hold multiple articles of the same item. By selling the weapons and equipment for materials, Shifeng could maximize the number of items he brought back to God's domain. Naturally, Sky Slicer was more than happy to accept Shifeng's offer. The Matchless family members that had cornered Shifeng earlier consisted of the guild's elites and experts. Most of the players that had fallen to Shifeng had been experts. Hence, the weapons and equipment they had dropped were considered top tier in Cold Wind City. Through this transaction, Shifeng had obtained close to 8,000 gold in rare materials. If he resold these materials in his home world, he could easily earn over 20,000 gold. However, Shifeng wouldn't sell all of the materials even for a single payment of 20,000 gold. These rare materials could help the candlelight trading firm's forgers improve quickly. The trading firm might even manage to nurture a master forger. After obtaining the materials, Shifeng quickly made his way to Cold Wind City's library. Meanwhile, news of Shifeng's triumph over the Matchless family quickly spread throughout Cold Wind City, shocking the resident players. That guy is so awesome. Not only did he suppress Matchless family by himself, but even Centurion Dynasty treated him with respect. I wish I had half his strength. After this, Lifeless Thorn will have to relinquish his position as Cold Wind City's #1 expert. I wonder if this expert is accepting disciples. If he is or plans to start an adventurer team or guild, I'll be the first to apply. For a time, Cold Wind City's players heatedly discussed this newcomer. Meanwhile, a man wearing ice blue armor and wielding a purple spear faced off against a level 54, Great Lord ranked demonic Frost Wolf in the Snow Rift, Cold Wind City's forbidden land. Despite the Frost Wolf's upper hand in speed and strength, it was helpless against this indifferent man. On the contrary, the player repeatedly restricted its movements. Because of this one man, the 20-man team following him easily dealt with the demonic Frost Wolf. Less than a minute after the fight had begun, the demonic Frost Wolf collapsed and dropped several items. The team members watched as their experience bars rose quite a bit. While the team rested, a heroic-looking female swordsman turned to the indifferent man, who rested with his eyes closed. Giggling, she said, "Lifeless, didn't you say that you're the strongest player in Cold Wind City? It seems that you have a rival now." A rival? Lifeless Thorn's eyes opened when he heard these words. Shaking his head, he said, "Cold Wind City's experts are clueless. They're nowhere near being a suitable rival for me. I'm not talking about them," the female swordsman, cleansing whistle, responded. Revealing a leisurely smile, she said, "Weren't you boasting about how powerful you are? Do you think you can stand against 10,000 elites from Matchless family? You've got to be kidding. You're talking about 10,000 elite players." Lifeless Thorn rolled his eyes. "Then why do you claim to be invincible in Cold Wind City? Here, take a look at this." Not long ago, a swordsman expert single-handedly suppressed Matchless family's army. Centurion Dynasty even offered him a gift as an apology, Cleansing Whistle said, giggling as she sent a copy of Shifeng's battle video to Lifeless Thorn. This is, although Lifeless Thorn wanted to refute Cleansing Whistle's words, he couldn't help his shock as he watched the battle video. How can there be such a powerful expert in the city? Well, hadn't you said something earlier about the swordsman class being crap? Now you know how powerful swordsmen are, Cleansing Whistle said, feeling a little proud when she saw the man's shock. He is powerful. He is on an entirely different level than I am, Lifeless Thorn straightforwardly admitted. The assassin's admission stunned Cleansing Whistle. She had thought the news would shake Lifeless Thorn's confidence, allowing her to get some payback for his insults towards her class. Before Cleansing Whistle could say more, Lifeless Thorn stood and took a return scroll from his bag. "What are you doing?" Cleansing Whistle asked curiously. "Do you really have to ask?" "I'm going to look for that expert," Lifeless Thorn said, excitement flashing in his eyes. "Are you mad? We wasted all that time to get here, yet you're going back, just like that." Cleansing Whistle was astonished. However, ignoring her words, Lifeless Thorn activated the return scroll. He then transformed into a streak of light as he left the snow rift. Seeing this, Cleansing Whistle and the other team members had no choice but to take out return scrolls and head back as well. Meanwhile, in Cold Wind City's Nobles District, Shifeng impatiently took out the animal hide Sky Slicer had given him and carefully inspected as he traveled in an advanced carriage. Chapter 1454, Treasure that Surpasses Epic Rank. Chapter 1454, Treasure that Surpasses Epic Rank. Chapter 1454, Treasure that Surpasses Epic Rank. It's no wonder why Sky Slicer couldn't do anything with this. When Shifeng tried to inspect the hide, he was only able to learn its name, Tattered Animal Hide. The item displayed no further information. Although this animal hide radiated a faint trace of divine might, due to time, it was damaged beyond recognition. The images and words that had been inscribed on the item were nearly impossible to discern. Fortunately, Shifeng was confident that he was even more skilled at analyzing items than a master appraiser. "I wonder what this item is, exactly." Shifeng then activated omniscient eyes and inspected the hide once more. The moment he tried to do so, a loading bar appeared above the item. Watching the loading bar, Shifeng was astonished. How is this possible? Just what kind of item is this? When he used omniscient eyes to appraise dark gold items, the process took no more than 10 seconds, yet this scrap of hide required 30 seconds. Not even epic items took so long to appraise. As the seconds ticked by, the process restored the images and words on the animal hide. By the time the loading bar was full and disappeared, the originally tattered hide seemed as if it had regained its vitality as it began to restore itself. In the blink of an eye, the tattered animal hide looked brand new. "This is an ancient shrine?" Shifeng gave the leather an incredulous look. "Big brother Yi Feng, has something happened?" Yang Ya asked from beside Shifeng. Everyone in the carriage was curious, looking to Shifeng for an explanation. This man had remained calm even when he stood against an army of 10,000 players, yet he stared at the hide Sky Slicer had given him in surprise. "It's nothing. I'm just satisfied with the transaction with Sky Slicer," Shifeng said, chuckling. Although Shifeng had brushed the matter off verbally, inside, he was ecstatic. Ancient shrines were considerably old and mysterious locations. No one knew who had built them, yet every large-scale otherworld had them. Ancient shrines were extremely dangerous, guarded by powerful monsters. They were also crowded with traps. Even so, players residing in large-scale otherworlds swarmed to these ancient shrines like madmen. This was because ancient shrines housed the passage to travel from their otherworlds to God's domain's continent. As otherworlds experts grew more powerful, they would find clues leading to these ancient shrines. They would then search for the shrines' locations before exploring their interiors. Eventually, they would find God's domain. However, this process normally only started after players reached level 100. The maps that contained these ancient shrines were generally high-level areas. Moreover, the ancient shrines themselves were very well hidden. The animal hide Sky Slicer had given him was a record of all of the locations of and information about the Ice Crystal World's ancient shrines. This item would save players a lot of time. Only now did Shifeng understand why it had taken an unusual amount of time to appraise the animal hide. There was no doubt that the ancient shrine map in his hand was worth far more than a measly epic item. After all, whoever possessed this map would have full access to the Ice Crystal World. As long as he developed the path to one of the ancient shrines, he could freely transfer resources between the Ice Crystal World and his home world. The benefits of reselling these items could even tempt super guilds. The sooner he opened this path, the more benefits he'd obtain. According to the ancient shrine map, the easiest ancient shrine to reach was in a level 50 to 70 map. This map was a forbidden land that connected the various NPC cities in the Ice Crystal World. For Cold Wind City, this map was the Snow Rift. Only, the map indicated that the Snow Rift's ancient shrine lay under its core region, so it would be extremely difficult to locate. By the time anyone discovered the hidden map, Ice Crystal World's mainstream players would have exceeded the recommended level. With this map, my trip here has certainly been worth it. Shifeng began to formulate numerous plans as he inspected the ancient shrine's location. He had come to the Ice Crystal World because of a quest. Originally, he would have had to wait until someone from the Ice Crystal World activated an ancient shrine's teleportation gate to return to this world after finishing his quest. Moreover, that was dependent on whether or not the player who discovered the shrine would publish the teleportation gate's location. After all, he wouldn't be able to return to the Ice Crystal World unless he found another teleportation gate on God's Domain's continent. However, things had changed. If he could activate an ancient shrine before he left, he would travel between worlds unhindered. This would give Zero Wing an advantage. Moreover, unlike the Dark Den, where he could only take one person with him, the ancient shrine's teleportation gates wouldn't have such a restriction. Of course, he'd have to pay the teleportation fee. Incredibly powerful NPCs guarded ancient shrine's teleportation gates, and each of these NPCs determined the fees based on how much distance separated the two worlds. Generally, the fee ranged between 20 and 50 magic crystals per person. Although Shifeng had once encountered a gate that charged 1 mana stone per person. Usually, only independent elite and expert players could afford to travel back and forth between worlds. However, the cost was nothing compared to the potential profits guilds could gain. After all, every other world had its own specialty resources that were extremely rare in God's domain. If guilds had to pay a small teleportation fee to obtain these precious resources, they would be more than happy to part with the cost. Right now, opening a path to the ancient shrine was far more important than obtaining eternal ice crystals to Shifeng. As long as he activated the ancient shrine, he'd accept failing the quest and losing his chance to trade eternal ice crystals for the Bracelet of Time. He could simply rely on the Ice Crystal World's resources to earn 5 million magic crystals within a month and purchase the Bracelet of Time for the originally stated price. It seems I'll need to make a trip to this ancient shrine later. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng carefully inspected the information on the animal hide. No one should ever underestimate an ancient shrine. Based on his memories, an ancient shrine required a considerable amount of time to raid and conquer. And he was alone in the Ice Crystal World. It wouldn't be easy to clear a path. As for the eternal ice crystals, Shifeng intended to visit the library before making his decision. If he could find a way to obtain the 10 eternal ice crystals, he would save a massive amount of magic crystals. After looking at the ancient shrine map for some time, Shifeng felt his head ache. The ancient shrine in question would be extraordinarily difficult to raid. Only now did he understand why the various otherworld's large guilds required a month to clear out a single shrine. Even a low-level ancient shrine, like the one located below the Snow Rift, was guarded by a level 70 mythic monster. Even the Snow Rift's final boss was a level 70, Grand Lord ranked 9-headed Earth Dragon. Although only one tier separated the two, the difference in strength was like heaven and earth. Alone, he could never defeat a level 70, mythic-ranked boss. When Shifeng finished examining the ancient shrine map, he turned to Solitary 9 and asked, "Brother 9, would you to help me with something?"
"Help you?"
Solitary 9 asked, confused. Yes. I wish to establish an adventurer team in Cold Wind City, Shifeng stated. Chapter 1455 Adventurer Team Established. Chapter 1455 Adventurer Team Established. Chapter 1455 Adventurer Team Established. Establish an adventurer team? Big Brother Yi Feng, are you joking? For a moment, everyone in the advanced carriage looked at Shifeng in surprise, wondering if they had misheard. Shifeng had previously expressed his lack of interest in establishing his own force. He had only come to Cold Wind City from another region to complete a quest. Yet, this man had just stated that he wanted to establish his own adventurer team. They were both confused and excited to hear this. If Shifeng formed an adventurer team, it would undoubtedly flourish. In addition, during the previous battle, Shifeng had made a name for himself in Cold Wind City. He wouldn't have any issues establishing a guilds, much less an adventurer team. They could already see players lining up to apply. What do you need our help with? Solitary 9 asked, practically glowing. He had already decided to join any force this man established. After all, Shifeng's strength and combat standards were far more impressive than his own. Watching Shifeng's battle had opened the doors to a completely new world for him. Unfortunately, Shifeng hadn't shown any interest in setting up his own force, so he hadn't asked the swordsman about it. He had only hoped to form a close relationship with the swordsman and find an opportunity to seek Shifeng's guidance. Now, however, he didn't need to do so. He could simply join Shifeng's adventurer team. His goal in establishing an adventurer team was to improve his combat standards by delving into God's domain's various ruins and dungeons. He did not like participating in the struggles between guilds. Most importantly, he had always hated the way Matchless family and Centurion dynasty had operated. Hence, he had established the Aurora Sword adventurer team. He had thought that he and his companions could join Waveheart, Cold Wind City's #1 adventurer team, if the guilds put too much pressure on Aurora Sword. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about that anymore. I'd like to ask your help in advertising and organizing the adventurer team's recruitment. After giving the matter some more thought, he continued, I don't need a lot of people for the team. 3,000 or 4,000 members will be enough. Official members will have to reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor at the very least, though the requirement will increase as time goes on. Cold Wind City had its own Divine Colosseum, and although it wasn't connected to those in other cities, it wouldn't affect players' evaluations. The 5th floor? Yang Ye's jaw dropped. Big Brother Yi Feng, very few people in Cold Wind City will be able to meet that requirement. Most experts can only reach the 4th floor. Yang Ya was one of Aurora Sword's top-ranked experts, but even she had only recently made it to the 5th floor. Quality is more important than quantity. Of course, we could let players take another set of tests before joining the adventurer team, Shifeng said. He then took out the list of Zero Wing's test criteria when recruiting members, displaying it for Solitary 9 and his party. Not all talents in God's domain were powerhouses. Rather than only recruiting those who were already strong, they could also look for players with potential. Players with potential would become reserve members for the moment. Reserve members would then be tested and judged based on their improvement speed. They could become official members once they reached a certain standard. If not, they would have to resort to the primary test, reaching the Trial Tower's 5th floor. Although this 2-stage process was tedious, it helped Zero Wing avoid missing out on potential experts. Of course, there was a minimum requirement to become a reserve member. Players had to reach the Trial Tower's 4th floor. At this stage of the game, the Trial Tower's 4th floor was still a fairly difficult hurdle for players. However, as player standards continued to improve, more of them would reach the 4th floor. If a player could not even reach the 4th floor, there was no point for them to take the test to become a reserve member. Even so, Shifeng's requirements stunned Solitary 9 and his companions. In Cold Wind City, players who could reach the Trial Tower's 4th floor were generally recruited to become elite members in one of the 2 major guilds, yet they would only be reserve members in Shifeng's adventurer team. Once the city's players found out about this, they'd call him a madman. After all, how could an adventurer team offer more benefits than a guild? Convincing 1,000 people to join this man's adventurer team would be immensely difficult, much less 5,000 people. Brother Yifeng, what do you intend to call your adventurer team? Solitary 9 asked. The adventurer team's name? Shifeng thought about how others had called him an Azura. Being intensely uncreative, he replied, let's call it the Azura Adventurer Team. At first, he had considered simply calling it the Zero Wing Adventurer Team. After all, he had planned to use this adventurer team as reinforcements for Zero Wing's core members. However, after giving the matter some thought, he gave up on the idea. After all, many of God's Domain's experts disliked the restrictions guilds imposed on their members. Instead, he could invite the experts that refused to join Zero Wing to his Azura Adventurer Team. This way, the Azura Adventurer Team could collect independent experts who disliked guilds, forming a symbiotic relationship with Zero Wing. Then, Brother Yifeng, can my Aurora Sword Adventurer Team join yours? Solitary 9 asked anxiously after taking a deep breath. Of course. It'll help me out quite a bit if you join. As long as your team members can meet one of the two requirements, they are welcome, Shifeng said, smiling. He already had a rough estimation of Solitary 9's strength. He had also listened to Yang Ya's comments on the matter. Not only was Solitary 9 one of Cold Wind City's top 3 MTS, but he had also reached the last stage of the Trial Tower's 6th floor. He was only a step away from the 7th. Although he didn't know any advanced combat techniques, he was not that far from the half-step refinement realm. In Zero Wing, he could easily rank among the guild's top 10 MTS. It was quite impressive. Furthermore, Solitary 9 hadn't received any official training like Zero Wing's core members had. The man had reached that standard of his own power. If Solitary 9 were offered sufficient training and guidance, he could easily reach the half-step refinement realm. Given enough time, reaching the refinement realm wouldn't be much of an issue. As such a capable expert, why wouldn't he welcome Solitary 9 into his adventurer team? Unfortunately, he'd have no choice but to let go the Aurora Sword members who couldn't meet the recruitment requirements. It was important that an organization adhere to its own rules. Otherwise, the organization would lose its members' trust. I understand. Solitary 9 replied. The Azura Adventurer Team wanted experts. He'd have no choice but to compensate the Aurora Sword members who didn't make the cut. Following which, Shifeng and his new companions drew up a list of benefits that the Azura Adventurer Team would offer its members. With such a high recruitment requirement, not many players would apply if they didn't offer appropriate benefits. Before they realized it, their advanced carriage had arrived before Cold Wind City's library. What a marvelous library! As soon as Shifeng alighted from the carriage, he could not help but stare at the mountainous building before him. Compared to White River City's library, Cold Wind City's was a giant. The building was well over 300 meters tall. It was large enough to fill 3 sports arenas. At the same time, the library felt ancient like some long-lost ruin. Following which, Shifeng activated his Demon Hunter title and approached the entrance. The 4 NPC guards by the doors glanced at Shifeng as he passed by, showing no intention of stopping the swordsman. Elsewhere, Solitary 9 published the recruitment information for the Azura Adventurer Team on Cold Wind City's official forums. At the same time, Yang Ya and the others saw to the necessary arrangements to spread the news throughout the city. Very quickly, news about Shifeng's an adventurer team reached every player in Cold Wind City. What? He's actually trying to establish an adventurer team? When Thundering Sky, who had recently resurrected, received the news, his expression darkened. Chapter 1456 Adventurer Team's Benefits. Chapter 1456 Adventurer Team's Benefits. Chapter 1456 Adventurer Team's Benefits. Guild Leader, quite a few of our members have withdrawn from the guild as soon as they heard the news. If we don't do something to stop this, I'm afraid that we'll lose more of our members, Featherwind cautiously reported to Thundering Sky. The battle at the auction house dealt a massive blow to Matchless Family's reputation, and because of that, the guild had lost over 1,000 elites and experts. Yet, despite such huge losses, Matchless Family couldn't do anything about them. After all, The guild was utterly helpless against Shifeng. To make matters worse, Shifeng had decided to establish his own adventurer team. They couldn't afford to provoke Shifeng when he stood alone, but they could still avoid the man. Matchless Family had over 100,000 members. Even if Shifeng were more powerful, he wouldn't be able to damage the guild's foundations if their members spread out. If he had an adventurer team under his control, however, Matchless Family would likely have to face thousands of players in the future. It had become even harder to deal with this expert. Damn it. Just who is he? Why haven't we heard of this guy before? Thundering Sky's expression twisted as he read the latest report. If not for Shifeng's sudden appearance, their plans wouldn't have been interrupted, and he would have secured his hold on Coldwind City. Guild leader, should we contact those people? Featherwind asked softly. It can't be helped. At this rate, Coldwind City will either end up in Centurion Dynasty's hands or the Azura adventurer teams. Since they've taken Coldwind City from me, I won't let them have it, either, Thundering Sky growled, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Contact them. Tell them that Matchless Family is willing to join their guild. However, we require that they destroy Centurion Dynasty and the Azura adventurer team. Although Coldwind City's players couldn't travel to other NPC cities right now, they could communicate with players in these cities offline. An upper echelon from Hecate, a large guild in another NPC city, had contacted Matchless Family, stating Hecate's interest in purchasing the guild. Initially, Thundering Sky had hesitated. After all, Hecate was far more powerful than Matchless Family, controlling more than 5 NPC cities. Hecate even ruled over Ice Crystal City, the Ice Crystal world's largest NPC city. Thundering Sky wasn't confident of Matchless Family's survival should it insult this massive guild. He had hoped to solidify his control over Coldwind City before anyone cleared the Snow Rift. Even if his city were connected with other NPC cities, he'd more or less have the power to withstand outside forces. Now that he had lost any hope of becoming his city's overlord, joining Hecate was his best choice. Once the passage opened, with Hecate's secret support, Matchless Family would send both Centurion Dynasty and Shifeng to meet their maker. Understood. I'll see to it right away. Featherwind then logged out of the game and disappeared from the office. Elsewhere, after splitting up, Solitary 9 and the others took the 3,000 gold Shifeng had given them to purchase a considerably large plot of land from the city hall. They then visited the Adventurers Association to begin their residence's construction. Although the residence was not as luxurious as a guild residence, it could easily accommodate 1,000 people at a time. Hopeful applicants had already surrounded Azura's residence. Over 4,000 players waited for their evaluation, and this was only the beginning. As expected of the adventurer team established by Coldwind City's #1 expert, Azura's residence is even larger than Waveheart. That's right. I bet it won't be long before Azura becomes the #1 adventurer team in Coldwind City. While the crowd waited for the application process to start, Solitary 9 emerged and posted the recruitment requirements at the entrance. As Azura's recruitment standards went public, many players were shocked. Is the Azura adventurer team crazy? Only those who reached the Trial Tower's 5th floor qualify to join? Do they not know what it means to reach the Trial Tower's 5th floor? What? Even those who can reach the 4th floor have to deal with further testing. If I had that kind of strength, I would have joined a guild as a core member. Why would I even bother joining an adventurer team? Is this really an adventurer team? Why do I feel like its recruitment requirements are harsher than a large guild's? With these standards, I doubt that Azura will even recruit 1,000 members. No, it might not even get 500 members. Is the Azura adventurer team toying with us? Crap. Isn't this just an adventurer team? Who would be desperate enough to deal with this crap? When the players outside Azura's residence saw the requirements, some laughed, some cursed, and others simply turned and left. Everyone thought that the Azura adventurer team was mad. As far as they knew, Azura's recruitment requirements were even higher than a first-rate guild's, not to mention Coldwind City's guilds. With such high requirements, only a small number of players throughout the Ice Crystal world would bother to join the adventurer team. After all, Azura was merely an adventurer team. It couldn't offer any significant benefits. An adventurer team just existed to give players an easier time forming teams and parties to raid dungeons and explore ruins. Expert players never needed to worry about finding party members. Furthermore, the Azura adventurer team had only recently been established. Even with an expert like Shifeng, without dungeon raid or ruin exploration results, expert players were less inclined to consider an adventurer team. Commander, players have stood outside our doors for quite some time now, yet only a few have applied. What should we do? Yang Ya stated at the crowd outside in frustration. Yang Ya, stop calling me commander. Now that we've joined the Azura adventurer team, Yifeng is the commander. I am simply one of Azura's party leaders, Solitary 9 said. Regarding the recruitment issue, the commander has stated that if people don't apply, we'll reveal this benefit to the public. He had mentioned the possibility of this awkward situation to Shifeng, and after giving the matter some thought, the man had decided to raise the team members' benefits. Any official member of the Azura adventurer team could use contribution points to purchase dark gold weapons and equipment as well as the opportunity to learn various combat techniques. What? Co-commander, is that true? Yang Ya exclaimed when she heard this. Being able to purchase dark gold weapons and equipment from the adventurer team was already impressive. Even Cold Wind City's experts only had a few dark gold items on them. Usually, only Guild's core members had any access to such items, yet the Azura's official members could bid on these items. However, the dark gold items paled in comparison to the combat techniques. Most players knew something about combat techniques, mysterious techniques that could significantly improve one's combat power. Unfortunately, very few players actually knew any of these techniques. In fact, neither of Cold Wind City's two large guilds had any players that had learned a combat technique. Yet, the Azura adventurer team offered to teach its members various combat techniques. This felt like a dream. The commander made the decision, so don't worry about it. In any case, publish the information outside. Solitary 9 nodded. He, too, had been surprised when he had heard Shifeng's decision. Following which, Yang Ya ran to the notice board outside the residence's entrance and published this shocking announcement. Chapter 1457, Clue to Evolution. Chapter 1457, Clue to Evolution. Chapter 1457, Clue to Evolution. Cold Wind City's library. As soon as Shifeng entered the library, he felt as if he had just stepped into a different world. The library didn't contain any books whatsoever. Instead, the hall included a starry sky and organized shrubbery. Creeks and bridges snaked through the main hall. From time to time, one caught sight of glittering, translucent balls of water rising from the creeks before they dispersed into tiny drops. All of these creeks originated from a single location, the massive water ball hovering in the center of the hall. Not even Starmoon City's library was this beautiful. What an amazing library! It's fully automated with the use of magic water balls. The mana density is double that of outside. If players could practice their spells in here, their learning efficiency would double, maybe triple. Shifeng could not help his surprise when he sensed the building's mana. However, Shifeng was surprised to see only a few magical class players in the library. At a glance, he only counted 200 to 300 players. It was an abnormally small number for a library. What he didn't know was that one had to become a baron before they could enter Cold Wind City's library. If not for Shifeng's The Demon Hunter title, the level 180 NPC guards at the entrance would have chased him away. He didn't give the matter too much thought, though. He approached the central water ball and began to search for information on the eternal ice crystals. It was far more convenient to search through the magic water ball than it would be to leaf through numerous books. There sure is a lot of information here. Shifeng was astonished when his search for the eternal ice crystal came back with over 100 results. Normally, he'd be lucky if he got 10 or so results for a particular search. Fortunately, it was usually enough information to find the item they wanted, yet hundreds of entries mentioned the eternal ice crystals. This almost guaranteed that he could find the crystal's location. Following which, Shifeng browsed through the information. How is this possible? What Shifeng found shocked him. The eternal ice crystal was actually a mana crystal. Only, due to the ice crystal world's influence, the power of frost tainted these mana crystals, transforming them into eternal ice crystals. These crystals could be found in the ice crystal world's various forbidden lands, but only Great Lord-ranked bosses and above had a chance of dropping them. Unfortunately, these bosses wouldn't drop complete eternal ice crystals. Rather, they had a very low chance of dropping ice crystal fragments. One had a 50% chance of successfully synthesizing 10 ice crystal fragments into one completely eternal ice crystal. No wonder she gave me a month for this quest. It's certainly not going to be easy. Shifeng frowned. Although the Snow Rift was a forbidden land, it didn't have many field bosses. Considering the low drop rate and the 50% success rate, it would take a long time to obtain one eternal ice crystal, much less 10. I guess I need to hurry. Now that he knew that eternal ice crystals were actually mana crystals, he had even more reason to obtain them. He also needed mana crystals to evolve the Abyssal Blade. Although the Tier 1 Abyssal Blade was plenty powerful, particularly when it came to compatibility rate, its basic attributes weren't quite on the level of top-tier epic weapons. He wanted to evolve the Abyssal Blade, but he hadn't found any mana crystals, so he had been forced to set the matter aside for some time. If he could evolve the Abyssal Blade once more, he'd be more confident of defeating the Ancient Shrine's guardian boss. Armed with this new information, Shifeng was glad he had decided to establish an adventurer team in Coldwind City. He wouldn't have had any hope of collecting enough eternal ice crystals in time if he were alone. Following which, Shifeng left the library and hurried towards Azura's residence. Shortly after the Azura adventurer team had published the new benefits, the crowd outside the team's residence went into an uproar. What? Members can trade contribution points for combat techniques? Azura is actually willing to teach combat techniques. Not even the city's 2 large guilds offer that benefit. Although Coldwind City had many experts, only a handful had learned combat techniques. These experts treated these techniques like family heirlooms, refusing to teach any outsider. But the general public knew how powerful combat techniques were. A player with a combat technique could easily defeat one without. Moreover, unlike skills and spells, players could improve their combat standards while they learned a technique. This was yet another reason that experts refused to teach others their techniques. They adamantly refused all sorts of payment for the training. Yet, the Azura adventurer team wanted to teach its members various combat techniques. The news stunned countless players. None of them doubted the validity of Azura's offer. As Coldwind City's #1 expert, Shifeng certainly knew many combat techniques. There wasn't anything surprising about him teaching his members 1 or 2 of these techniques. Moreover, the more powerful an expert was, the more they would value their promises. After a short moment, players crowded the previously empty registration area. The crowd even included players who had yet to reach the trial tower's 4th floor. These players begged Solitary 9 to give them a chance and let them become reserve members. For a time, Solitary 9 and the other players manning the registration area were incredibly busy. More players had come to apply than they had expected. Even 5th floor experts were rushing to put in their applications. Among these experts, many had been main force members from well-known adventurer teams or experts from the 2 large guilds. In less than 30 minutes, Azura had over 100 official members and 500 reserve members. Unfortunately, Solitary 9 rejected every player who hadn't yet reached the trial tower's 4th floor, telling these players to return after they did so. News of the Azura adventurer team's offer to teach its members combat techniques quickly spread throughout the city. It became a hot topic among these players, and many expressed their intention to join the organization. The city's 2 large guilds suffered headaches because of this. They had planned to ridicule Azura for its high recruitment requirements, but now, they were only frustrated over the new adventurer team. If Azura gathered enough experts and taught them combat techniques, there was no doubt that the adventurer team would become Coldwind City's overlord. Guild leader, I've notified Hecate. However, more than 500 players have already joined Azura. At this rate, Azura will rule the city long before Hecate opens a path to Coldwind City, Featherwind said, shocked as he overlooked the statistics he had recently received. This won't do. Go, Anne. No. We'll go and find Wave Heart. Even if we have to pay a high price, we have to form an alliance with the adventurer team and convince them to deal with Azura, Thundering Sky said as he stood. He had hoped to avoid allying with Wave Heart to deal with Azura, but it'd be enough if the adventurer team helped Matchless family survive until Hecate arrived. Guild leader, a report just came in. Wave Heart's Lifeless Thorn has led a team to Azura's residence. By the looks of it, Lifeless Thorn plans to take action, Featherwind said, smiling coldly at the latest report. Lifeless Thorn was a battle maniac. Since his debut in Coldwind City, not a single expert he had challenged had lasted more than 5 moves. Eventually, he had become Coldwind City's publicly acknowledged #1 expert. Not even the city's main guilds could do anything against the man and were forced to ignore his existence. His making a move. Thundering Sky could not help but laugh. This is going to be interesting. Let's go. We're heading to the residence to watch this play out. Chapter 1458, Demigod Ranked Expert. Chapter 1458, Demigod Ranked Expert. Chapter 1458, Demigod Ranked Expert. Coldwind City, Azura Adventurer Team's residence. As soon as Shifeng stepped out of the advanced carriage, he was greeted by a sea of people crowding around the residence's entrance. It was even more lively than an imperial capital's auction house. Why are so many people here? Shifeng was confused to see such a large crowd. Around a dozen people stood before the registration area, the leader of which was a man in icy blue armor, holding a purple spear in his right hand. Although this man stood in silence, the surrounding players had distanced themselves from him, creating a wide, open space clearing. Aside from this man's companions, no player dared to move within 20 yards of him. I hadn't expected Lifeless Thorn to visit. Why do you think he's here? Do you really need to ask? He's here to issue a challenge. Lifeless Thorn was Coldwind City's #1 expert. Now that someone has usurped his position, he must be here to reclaim his status. Indeed. I've heard Waveheart members talk about how bored he is because he hasn't been able to find someone who can put up a decent fight. He's been spending time in the Forbidden Land to open a path to other NPC cities so he can find new experts to challenge. This is going to be interesting. I wonder which of the 2 experts will win the duel. You can't figure that out on your own. Lifeless Thorn is definitely going to win. He's invincible in Coldwind City. On the other hand, the mysterious swordsman has only made a name for himself recently. I wonder if that swordsman will accept Lifeless Thorn's challenge. The spectating crowd discussed the potential duel between Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn. They all anticipated the fight between these 2 powerful experts. Guild leader, Lifeless Thorn has grown stronger again. He's replaced his old weapon, too. His last weapon was a top-tier, level 45, dark gold spear called Meteor Spear. It had been crimson red, and I've heard that Lifeless Thorn had found it in a dark gold treasure chest. It seems that he had earned quite the harvest from the Snow Rift, Featherwind said, smiling as he gazed at the purple spear in the berserker's hand. That damnable swordsman is in trouble. Indeed. If Lifeless Thorn gets serious, not even Sky Slicer and I would have any hope against him. That's why Hecate's been urging us to do everything we can to recruit him. It's a pity that he isn't interested in joining a guild. I doubt he even would have joined Waveheart if not for the help in obtaining better weapons and equipment, Thundering Sky said as he tried to sort out a tangle of complex emotions. He had always treated Lifeless Thorn like the biggest thorn in his side, but even Hecate had warned him not to provoke the man. Now, Lifeless Thorn would finally be of some use to him. Lifeless, I already told you that our commander isn't here. Standing here is pointless. If you want to challenge the commander, I'll let him know once he's finished his tasks and returns. Solitary 9 growled, frustrated with Lifeless Thorn obstructing the registration area. Solitary 9 had personally experienced this man's power. The gap between them was massive. Despite being one of the top 3 MTS in Coldwind City, he had only lasted 3 moves against Lifeless Thorn. From start to end, he had been powerless to retaliate. Moreover, their duel had been over a month ago. Now, Lifeless Thorn radiated an even more frightening feeling. With a single glance from the man, Solitary 9 felt as if he trudged through a muddy swamp, his movement growing sluggish. On the surface, the two large guilds ruled over Coldwind City. In reality, however, these guilds only operated as they wished because of Lifeless Thorn's disinterest in struggles over power and resources. Since the Berserker blocked off the registration area, who would be bold enough to come forth to apply to Azura? That won't be a problem. I have plenty of spare time. If I can't face him today, then you can contact your commander and inform him of my challenge, Lifeless Thorn said, smiling. He can choose the time and place. It doesn't matter to me. 9. You know that Lifeless is a battle maniac. Once he has made a decision, nothing can stop him. Just contact your commander, Cleansing Whistle advised. In reality, she, too, was curious to see who would win a fight between Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn. Lifeless Thorn might have claimed that he wasn't a match for the newcomer, but he was simply being humble. She was fully aware of the man's true power. Not only had he obtained the top-tier, epic weapon, Thunder Spear, but he had also obtained the Lightning Saint's legacy, a peak legacy. Even throughout the Ice Crystal world, Lifeless Thorn could rank near the top. How could he possibly lose to some unknown swordsman? You guys. As Solitary 9 struggled with his frustration, a deep voice reached him from down the hall. All right, I accept your challenge. Everyone immediately turned towards the voice. Commander. Solitary 9 gave Shifeng a confused look as he approached. Shifeng had told him that he needed to concentrate on finding certain information, and they shouldn't disturb him unless it were of the utmost importance. Hence, he had avoided contacting the commander. Ha ha ha. You've finally shown yourself. Lifeless Thorn smiled at Shifeng, who hid his name and appearance. His eyes shining with fighting spirit, he said, I knew an expert like you wouldn't refuse a challenge. The crowd had gasped when they heard Shifeng's answer. They hadn't expected the Azura Adventurer team to accept the challenge. I'll agree to your challenge, but a simple duel would be too boring. Why don't we make a bet? Shifeng asked, smiling. Even during his previous life, he had heard of this man. One of the 12 sacred berserkers, Lightning Warrior, Lifeless Thorn had only been a step away from becoming a Tier 6 berserker god. This player had become so famous in the past because he had provoked the super guild, King's Return. Although the guild eventually killed him, his defeat had been glorious. During the final battle, King's Return had dispatched 3 Tier 5 players to suppress Lifeless Thorn, yet he had killed one of these Tier 5 players before he had fallen. In the end, a Tier 6, God-ranked expert had joined the fray, and Lifeless Thorn had faltered and died. Lifeless Thorn's rise to prominence had been extremely fast. Although he had been incredibly famous in his own otherworld, he had only become truly renowned after venturing to God's Domain's continent. Once there, he had caused quite the commotion as he had challenged and defeated one expert from the God's Domain experts list after another. It hadn't taken him long to rank among the top 50 on the list. If not for the fact that he had remained a solo player, refusing to join any organization, he wouldn't have been stuck at Tier 5. If he hadn't been so stubborn and simply joined some random, first-rate guild, he would have likely become a Tier 6 God-ranked expert. Shifeng had never thought that he'd encounter Lifeless Thorn in the Ice Crystal world. He was truly blessed. In the past, Lifeless Thorn had never joined a guild, but now that Shifeng had established his own adventurer team, he could attempt to recruit the Berserker. It'd be almost as good as convincing the man to join Zero Wing. If Shifeng succeeded, he'd have yet another powerful supporter. Chapter 1459, Battle for Number 1. Chapter 1459, Battle for Number 1. Chapter 1459, Battle for Number 1. A bet. Smiling, Lifeless Thorn responded without hesitation, that won't be a problem. Even if you hadn't offered, I would have. I just wonder if you're brave enough to accept my wager. When they heard Lifeless Thorn's reply, Waveheart's members sent Shifeng provocative glances. At the same time, their gazes contained a hint of pity. They acted as if they already knew this bet's outcome. Solitary 9 finally realized what was happening. Quickly, he whispered to Shifeng, Commander, you must not agree to his bet. He wants your combat techniques. Not long ago, He had challenged every expert in Cold Wind City who had their own combat technique and forced the defeated to teach him. That's why he's become so powerful. Combat techniques. Realization dawned on Shifeng. He had been confused by how fast Lifeless Thorn had accepted his offer. Now, he knew why the man was so eager. He had proposed the bet to create an opportunity where he could recruit Lifeless Thorn into the Azura Adventurer team. He hadn't expected this berserker to have designs on him as well. Combat techniques were precious in God's domain. The various large guilds that had their own only taught their most important members. Everyone else would have to rely on others' battle videos, either mimicking those with combat techniques or creating their own. Shifeng now understood why Lifeless Thorn had risen so quickly on God's domain's continent. You're the one who suggested a bet. Are you chickening out? Lifeless Thorn ridiculed as he glanced at Shifeng. I have no issues. I'll accept your wager as long as it is within my capabilities to fulfill. Every core member in Zero Wing could learn the guild's combat techniques. Even if Lifeless Thorn didn't want to gamble combat techniques, if he joined Azura, he could easily purchase them with enough contribution points. Good. Hearing Shifeng's reply, Lifeless Thorn hurriedly said, my request is simple. If I win, you teach me that special footwork technique you used earlier. If you win, you can ask for whatever you want. Ordinary players would have watched Shifeng's battle against Matchless Family as entertainment. They wouldn't have examined the swordsman's skills. However, he had realized that Shifeng's disappearing act wasn't the result of a skill, but due to the man employing a special footwork technique to fool his opponent's eyes. He had never even heard of such powerful footwork before. Compared to this combat technique, those he had learned were garbage. Although Azura had declared that its members could purchase combat techniques with contribution points, he was fully aware that there were differences between techniques. This swordsman would never let his adventurer team's members trade CP for such an effective footwork technique. This guy really has a big appetite. He's actually aiming for Big Brother Yi Feng's unique combat technique right off the bat. He is shameless. Yang Ya stared at Lifeless Thorn with contempt. Solitary 9 and the others nodded in agreement. They had a rough understanding of combat techniques, as well. For example, offensive combat techniques were the most common, while defensive combat techniques were much rarer. Footwork and breathing techniques were the rarest, capable of enhancing a player's maneuverability. If a player learned one of those, their combat power could reach a whole new level. Yet, despite understanding the value of such a technique, Lifeless Thorn shamelessly asked for it. That's all? Shifeng asked. Yeah, that's all I want. Do you accept? Lifeless Thorn nodded, curious about Shifeng's calm reaction. I don't have any problems with that. My request is pretty simple as well. If I win, you have to join the Azura Adventurer team, Shifeng said, smiling. Deal. I'll join Azura if you can defeat me, Lifeless Thorn agreed without hesitation. However, he continued, to ensure that our duel is fair, we'll use balance mode. An uproar ripped through the crowd when they heard this. Lifeless Thorn, aren't you asking for too much? Not only have you asked for a powerful combat technique if you win, but you dare to ask for balanced mode? You're Cold Wind City's #1 expert. How is this fair? Solitary 9 cursed. In a balanced mode PvP, the opponent's basic attributes would equalize, and any level or tier suppression would be rendered useless. Normally, players only used this mode if they wanted to compare their techniques. Although I like PvP, I have no interest in one-sided oppression, Lifeless Thorn declared righteously. After watching Shifeng's battle video, he realized how high the swordsman's basic attributes were. He definitely wasn't a match for the swordsman. Although he was proud of his strength, he wasn't blindly confident. Alright. Let's use balanced mode. The suggestion didn't particularly surprise Shifeng. If Lifeless Thorn could not tell the difference between their basic attributes despite watching his battle video, he wouldn't want to recruit the man for the Azura Adventurer team. Good. Let's sign a contract, then. Hearing Shifeng's consent, Lifeless Thorn pulled out a contract he had prepared earlier. All it was missing was Shifeng's signature. After reading through the contract, Shifeng signed it. With the main god system as the judge, No one could deny the duel's outcome. Following which, Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn headed to one of the Divine Colosseum's combat rooms. The combat room, which could accommodate up to 10,000 spectators, was full. The large screen in the main hall would livestream the duel. Almost every player in Cold Wind City with nothing better to do made their way to the Divine Colosseum to watch the match. This duel would determine Cold Wind City's true #1 expert. No one wanted to miss this. Azura's commander is pretty arrogant. He dares to face Lifeless Thorn in balanced mode. He'll humiliate himself, Cleansing Whistle stated, smiling faintly at Shifeng, who stood in the arena. That's right. Brother Lifeless split spear is no laughing matter. Even Shadowless, the city's second-ranked expert, couldn't evade it after activating a berserk skill. Now that Brother Lifeless has the Thunder Spear, his split spear is even stronger. He can probably instant kill Shadowless now, a level 45 shield warrior said, nodding. While Waveheart's members merrily chatted, the timer above the stage began to count down. As if he had become someone completely different, Lifeless Thorn began to release a bone-chilling killing intent. The look in his eyes had changed as well. He felt like a ferocious beast. Tension gripped the stage as the seconds ticked by, and the players in the stands felt stifled. The moment the timer reached 0, Lifeless Thorn activated twofold Berserk, his aura becoming explosively intense. The Berserker knew he couldn't afford to be careless against Shifeng. If this fight had happened before he had obtained the Lightning Saint's legacy, he would have hesitated to challenge Shifeng. The swordsman's combat techniques were clearly superior to his. He would have been asking for a beating if he had challenged the man to a balanced mode duel. However, Peak Legacies granted legacy berserk skills, which could be used in conjunction with ordinary berserk skills. If he activated twofold berserk, his basic attributes would exceed Shifeng's by leaps and bounds. Even if Shifeng's combat standards were superior, the swordsman could never make up for the gap in attributes. I have a hidden class. Don't blame me for hiding it. You only have yourself to blame for being careless. I'll gladly take that footwork technique now. Lifeless Thorn smiled at Shifeng before activating charge and advancing. Chapter 1460, Complete Suppression. Chapter 1460, Complete Suppression. Chapter 1460, Complete Suppression. After activating charge, it took only an instant for Lifeless Thorn to cross the 20+ yards separating him and Shifeng. As soon as Lifeless Thorn reached his opponent, he thrust Thunder Spear at the other player, sending over 20 afterimages at Shifeng from different angles. It was impossible to find the real weapon among the fakes. How has his split spear become so much stronger? Solitary 9 could not help but gasp. When he had dueled Lifeless Thorn, the Berserker had only produced over a dozen spear images. Even with his shield, he hadn't been able to block every spear image, forced to rely on luck and hope he blocked the real weapon. Yet, the Berserker could now produce over 20 images, nearly double what he had previously been capable of. Just watching the images was confusing, not to mention trying to block the attack. Brother Lifeless twofold Berserk is impressive. Not even an MT can block so many images. The attack surprised Waveheart's members. Lifeless is taking this too seriously. Cleansing Whistle revealed a helpless smile as she watched the Berserker fight with everything he had. His opponent is doomed. Throughout her time raiding dungeons and adventuring with Lifeless Thorn, this was the first time she had seen him go all out. Moreover, in a balanced mode duel, the player with higher basic attributes would be suppressed to match the opponent's. Since Lifeless Thorn's attributes weren't affected, he wouldn't feel awkward as he moved. In contrast, Shifeng would need some time to get used to the lower attributes. It was clear that Lifeless Thorn realized this, yet he refused to give Shifeng any time to adapt. With so many advantages, the Berserker would have an easy time winning this duel. As the numerous spear images were about to devour Shifeng, a blue light flashed before him. Following which, a loud explosion shook the arena, followed by a powerful shockwave radiating across the stage. Lifeless Thorn's Thunder Spear had stopped an inch from Shifeng's neck. Impossible. Cleansing Whistle shot up from her seat, shock flashing in her eyes. Lifeless split spear. Why did it stop? What? Brother Lifeless messed up. The other Wave Heart members were similarly stunned. Lifeless Heart had rarely ever failed to hit his target with split spear. His opponent could only block the attack if they were lucky. Of course, nobody was more surprised than Lifeless Thorn. However, the Berserker didn't give up after his first attack had failed. Immediately, he executed split spear again, sending another 20+ spear images thrusting at Shifeng. Before the spear images reached Shifeng, another blue light flashed. This time, the thunder spear stopped several centimeters away from Shifeng's right shoulder. There was more distance between the weapon and the swordsman than before. Did it hit? What's going on? Wave Heart's members watched Shifeng in confusion, realizing that golden scales covered the man's body. He actually deflected Lifeless split spear. Is he some kind of monster? Cleansing Whistle's expression darkened as she watched the fight. Split spear was so impressive because it was nearly impossible to pinpoint the real weapon, which confused the opponent as they tried to defend themselves. But in the brief moment before Lifeless Thorn's weapon reached Shifeng, the swordsman located the real thunder spear and properly deflected it. His grasp of strength and timing was simply godlike. Before Cleansing Whistle could overcome her shock, Shifeng took a step forward and disappeared. He vanished. Lifeless Thorn immediately responded by executing Whirlwind Slash, his spear sweeping horizontally to slice everything within 10 yards of the Berserker. Dang! A loud clang echoed throughout the venue. Following which, Shifeng reappeared as he flew over a dozen yards backward before landing. Despite being knocked back so far, Shifeng hadn't lost a single HP. He had nullified Lifeless Thorn's horizontal slash with parry. As expected of the Lightning Warrior, his reactions are so fast. Shifeng smiled faintly as he glanced at the still vibrating killing ray. Split Sword was Lifeless Thorn's trademark combat technique. He had used it plenty of times against the experts on God's Domain Experts list. However, the technique was still immature right now. Although he could create over 20 spear images, his attacks were monotone. Against Shifeng, who was capable of pushing his 5 senses to their very limits and had a perfect grasp over his environment, the immature technique was useless. Moreover, although balanced mode would equalize the combatant's basic attributes, it wouldn't affect the player's physiques. To Shifeng, whose physique exceeded that of an ordinary Tier 2 player, Lifeless Thorn's split spear was a joke. Meanwhile, the Berserker felt an unprecedented pressure weigh down on him as he watched his opponent. In a clash of techniques, the player that used a skill first would lose. Although this duel wasn't a pure exchange of techniques, it was the first time he had encountered a player who could treat his split spear like a normal attack. You are incredibly strong. Despite the minor loss, Lifeless Thorn wasn't discouraged. Instead, he smiled as he said, "I admit that I am no match for you in terms of technique. However, combat techniques aren't the only factor that determine a player's strength. One must also take into account attributes and skills." Saying so, Lifeless Thorn's thunder spear shuddered slightly. Suddenly, 6 golden replicas of the weapon appeared around him. This move was Adjudication Spear, one of Thunder Spear's skills. Every Adjudication Spear carried 100% of Lifeless Thorn's strength. Moreover, he had complete control over the weapons and could use them alongside his split spear. The only downside was its 10-second duration. However, in a fight between experts, it was more than enough time. Guild leader, Lifeless Thorn is really scary. Azura's commander will definitely lose, Featherwind excitedly announced. Good. As expected of the publicly acknowledged, number 1 expert. If Shifeng lost, Lifeless Thorn would be Cold Wind City's undisputed, number 1 expert. The Azura Adventurer team's reputation would plummet, and although it would still pose a threat to Matchless Family, it wouldn't rule over Cold Wind City. As the upper echelons of Cold Wind City's large guilds sighed with relief, Shifeng walked towards his opponent. You are correct. A player's strength doesn't solely depend on their combat techniques. Attributes and skills do play a factor, Shifeng said, nodding. He then activated Tier 2 Blade Liberation and 9 Dragon Slash. Suddenly, the intensity of Shifeng's aura skyrocketed. At the same time, 12 abyssal blade phantoms manifested around him. You! You have a hidden class as well? Lifeless Thorn was dazed as he felt the power of Shifeng's aura, his heart pounding madly. Suddenly, he lost his previous confidence. Twofold Berserk was his biggest trump card. With absolute power, he could easily overwhelm his opponents, even if his techniques were inferior. However, based on the man's aura, Shifeng's basic attributes were now much higher than his. His opponent's 12 phantom swords even outnumbered his prided adjudication spears. As Lifeless Thorn stared, Shifeng appeared before him and lightly swung Killing Ray. Tier 2 legacy skill, Shadow Blade. Although Lifeless Thorn tried to defend himself, he was too slow, and 10 streaks of light, 1 blue and 9 black, struck him. Instantly, Lifeless Thorn's HP vanished, his body transforming into particles of light as he disappeared. As if time had frozen, silence dominated the combat room. Lifeless Thorn, Cold Wind City's #1 expert, had been defeated. Chapter 1461 Abyssal Blade Evolves. Chapter 1461 Abyssal Blade Evolves. Chapter 1461 Abyssal Blade Evolves. Only after the system had announced the duel's outcome did the audience react. He won, just like that. So fast. I couldn't even see what he did. Is this really a balanced mode PvP duel? Why do I feel like that guy is much stronger than Lifeless Thorn? Most people weren't surprised by the battle's outcome. After all, both Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn gave the city's large guilds headaches. It wasn't surprising to discover that one was stronger than the other. Rather, they were shocked over the battle's process. After watching the duel, the expert players that had hesitated over joining the Azura Adventurer team swore that they would join. Just who is this guy? Despair tore at Thundering Sky's heart as he watched Shifeng descend from the stage. He had hoped that even if Lifeless Thorn weren't a match for the swordsman, the difference between them wouldn't be so great. However, that clearly wasn't the case. Even an amateur could tell that Shifeng and Lifeless Thorn were on completely different levels. Thundering Sky could already foresee the Azura Adventurer team lording over Cold Wind City within a short time. His only choice was to rein in his members, avoiding provoking Azura's members as he bided for time until Hecate arrived. He had no other options. The commander is so amazing. I want to see what Wave Heart intends to do now. Yang Ya and the other Azura members were ecstatic. They had personally watched as Lifeless Thorn's undefeated legend was shattered, and a new legend was born in Cold Wind City. Azura could become one of the top adventurer teams in the Ice Crystal world, not to mention becoming Cold Wind City's overlord. Below the stage, Lifeless Thorn wore a blank look as he resurrected. I lost. He couldn't help but recall the final scene of the battle. Although Shifeng had used the opportunity to attack while he had been stunned, he wasn't sure that he could have blocked all 10 attacks as they aimed for his blind spots even if he hadn't been dazed. Even with his adjudication spears, he would have been lucky to block half of those attacks. In the end, nothing would have changed. He would have died all the same. He now realized that, aside from inferior basic attributes and combat standards, he didn't even have enough combat experience to stand against Shifeng. The man had the kind of combat experience that only came from risking one's life in one battle after another. Taking a few deep breaths, Lifeless Thorn approached Shifeng. I sincerely accept my defeat. I will adhere to my promise and join Azura. However, I'd like to ask you about something. Of course, you may also refuse to answer, Lifeless Thorn said. Ask away. I'll answer as best as I can, Shifeng offered. If I'm not mistaken, you should be a player from another region, correct? Lifeless Thorn asked, a hint of excitement coloring his voice. That's right. I'm not from the Cold Wind City region, Shifeng acknowledged, not bothering to hide the truth. The conclusion was easy to reach if one watched carefully. God's Domain had launched some time ago, and experts who were capable of becoming famous had already made a name for themselves. Even if they weren't well known, there should be some news of their achievements. It simply wasn't possible for such a terrifyingly powerful, unknown expert to pop in out of nowhere. The only explanation was that he had come from another region. If an ordinary player's arrival from another region were discovered, it could cause the player a lot of trouble. Shifeng, however, wasn't worried. Cold Wind City didn't have a player who would dare cause him trouble. I knew it. Eagerly, Lifeless Thorn asked, "Are there a lot of experts where you come from?" "A lot. Too many to count," Shifeng responded after giving the matter some thought. Shifeng realized what Lifeless Thorn was trying to say. To put it simply, the Berserker wanted to know if there were a lot of experts who were stronger than him. In reality, Lifeless Thorn was a refinement realm expert. However, he lacked combat experience. There weren't enough experts in Cold Wind City to spar with. As a result, his combat style was monotonous. Although it was effective against weaker players, experts of the same caliber could easily overcome his attacks. Of course, Lifeless Thorn wasn't the only person in such a predicament. Solitary 9 and the other experts faced the same problem. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do about it due to the Ice Crystal World's unique rules. Fortunately, if Lifeless Thorn and the others were trained properly, they could increase their strength in a short amount of time. Currently, Zero Wing was expanding on two fronts. Although the guild seemed strong on the surface, it sorely lacked experts. Recruiting Lifeless Thorn and these other experts would be of great help. "Then, can you take me there? I promise that I'll fully devote myself to the Azura Adventurer team. I won't join any other power." Hearing Shifeng's words, fighting spirit burned in Lifeless Thorn's gaze. He wanted to rush out of the Ice Crystal World and face those experts as soon as possible. "Not now. I still have some matters that I need to deal with. Once I've finished, I'll lead the top-ranking experts in Azura to develop elsewhere," Shifeng said, shaking his head. In reality, he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible as well, but he couldn't return to God's domain until he collected the eternal ice crystals. And unfortunately, he didn't have a strong enough team to raid the Snow Rift's ancient shrine yet. "We'll leave once you finish your task." Lifeless Thorn's excitement grew. "Commander, just tell me what you need. My team will accomplish it for you. I need to collect a sufficient number of ice crystal fragments. The more, the better. Only the Snow Rift's boss monsters, Great Lord rank and above, have a chance of dropping them," Shifeng explained. "Understood. I'll lead a team and kill those bosses right away." Lifeless Thorn nodded, turning to prepare to depart. "Hold on a minute. Before you go, take a look at these." Shifeng snatched the impatient Berserker's collar. First, he added Lifeless Thorn as a friend. He then sent the man a tutorial video for Void Steps. "This is only a tutorial. How much of it you learn depends on you." Void Steps was an advanced footwork technique, which Shifeng taught Zero Wing's core members. Even if a player failed to learn the full technique, they could grow stronger by studying it. Now that Lifeless Thorn had officially joined Azura, it was best that he learn the technique as quickly as possible. "This is," shock-colored Lifeless Thorn's face as he watched the tutorial video. He had never expected Shifeng to give it away so nonchalantly. His heart warmed, and his respect of this swordsman grew. After the duel, Cold Wind City's experts surged towards Azura's residence. In a few short hours, Azura's member count shot past 5,000. Although only 1,000 or so were official members, the rest became reserve members. Even so, so many experts made it easier for Shifeng to kill the Snow Rift's field bosses easily. He split the 5,000-plus Azura members into 50-man teams and sent the teams to various locations of the Snow Rift. Any team that encountered a Great Lord or higher boss was to contact him immediately. This way, he could use space movement to transport Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and the others' help. Their grinding efficiency was leaps and bounds above what Shifeng could accomplish on his own. In addition, he activated Divine Providence before landing the final blow, using the skill to increase the drop rate for ice crystal fragments. He had to admit again that Icarus's heart was a godly tool. With Divine Providence, he claimed one ice crystal fragment from every 6 or 7 Great Lords. He also obtained a fragment from every 3 or so Grand Lords he killed. Unfortunately, Snow Rift had a limited number of Grand Lord ranked field bosses. On the bright side, since no one had pioneered the Snow Rift yet, plenty of bosses were available in the Forbidden Land. Their spawn rate was incredibly fast as well. As a result, Shifeng constantly slaughtered bosses. Shifeng only gathered 100 ice crystal fragments after 3 days of grinding. By relying on divine providence, he transformed those 100 fragments into 10 eternal ice crystals. During this period, Shifeng had also risen from level 57 to level 58. Naturally, Lifeless Thorn and the others' levels skyrocketed, rising from level 45 to level 48 in just 3 days, pulling far ahead of Cold Wind City's other experts. Although Shifeng had achieved his goal, he didn't rush to turn in his quest. Rather, he ventured to a deserted location and took out the Abyssal Blade. He then attempted to evolve the magic weapon with the eternal ice crystals. "I hope this will work." Shifeng took in a deep breath and clicked the Revolve button on the Abyssal Blade's attribute panel. He chose the eternal ice crystals as the evolution material. Chapter 1462, Tier 2 Magic Weapon. Chapter 1462, Tier 2 Magic Weapon. Chapter 1462, Tier 2 Magic Weapon. Even after Shifeng selected the evolution material, the Abyssal Blade didn't react. Must it be mana crystals or nothing? Shifeng frowned. The last time he had found a mana crystal, it had been a coincidence. They were practically impossible to hunt down. As Shifeng was about to give up, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, replacement evolution material detected, eternal ice crystal. Do you wish to abandon the power of frost contained within the eternal ice crystals and evolve the Abyssal Blade? Abandon the power of frost. Although he was confused, Shifeng ecstatically clicked continue. Suddenly, the 10 eternal ice crystals in Shifeng's hands shattered, 2 clouds of smoke, one black and one white, emerging from their remains. Following which, the black smoke entered the Abyssal Blade. In response, the Abyssal Blade leaped from its sheath and hovered before Shifeng, trembling as it released dragon roars that echoed throughout the wilderness. At the same time, blood-red runes began to surface around the weapon. When the blood-red runes covered the sword entirely, the weapon began to release a rapidly growing pressure. Rather than a sword, Shifeng felt as if he stood before an angry dragon. The pressure was so great that he even struggled to breathe. The phenomenon only began to weaken after about 10 seconds. Eventually, the Abyssal Blade returned to its peaceful state. After evolving, the Abyssal Blade's appearance had transformed slightly. Now, the sword was entirely pitch black. It also radiated a faint trace of black miasma. A black dragon coiled around the sword's hilt, and blood-red runes had carved themselves into the blade. Overall, the Abyssal Blade's new appearance looked evil. "What powerful attributes!" Shifeng exclaimed when he inspected the attribute panel. Abyssal Blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon. Attack power plus 1720. All attributes plus 130. Attack speed plus 24. Ignore levels plus 18. Attacks have 60% chance to cause 220% damage. 37% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases damage by 2% to a maximum of 20%. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 5. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 45. Can be upgraded, devour 100 level 50 fine gold weapons and 30 level 50 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 45. Equipment Tier 2. Can be evolved, devour 100 mana crystals or eternal ice crystals to evolve to Tier 3. Additional active skill 1, Phantom Kill, Tier 2. Instantly creates a doppelganger under the wielder's control. Doppelganger has 90% of the wielder's attributes and all skills. The wielder can swap positions with the doppelganger at any time. Duration, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 2, Abyssal Bind, Tier 2. Binds up to 3 enemies simultaneously and prevents movement, reducing defense and magic resistance by 100%. The higher tiered the target is, the weaker the effect will be. Duration, 5 seconds. Cooldown, 40 seconds. Additional active skill 3, 9 Dragon Slash, Tier 2. Instantly creates 16 phantoms of the Abyssal Blade for wielder's use, Each phantom sword deals up to 80% damage. Duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Additional active skill 4, Abyssal Curse, Tier 2. Prevents all targets within a radius of 50 yards from moving or attacking for 6 seconds and reduces their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Effect doubles if there is only one target in range. Cooldown, 20 minutes. Additional passive skill, Abyssal Will. Improves wielder's physique depending on the surrounding mana density. The higher the mana density, the greater the improvement. Additional profound inheritance, Black Emperor, Tier 2. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of Death Aura. Each stack can be used to increase all attributes by 2% and attack speed and movement speed by 1% for 12 seconds or to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 4 seconds. Maximum of 30 stacks of Death Aura. Duration, 10 minutes. Cooldown, 8 hours. The famed Smith Olysses personally created the Abyssal Blade using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, ranking 31st. However, the Black Dragon King himself has cursed this sword. Beyond the immense strength the blade offers, the wielder must face a backlash after a certain amount of time. However, after Jack had remodeled the Abyssal Blade with a star crystal, the strength of the backlash has been reduced greatly. If the wielder is unable to suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the Black Dragon King's curse, permanently reducing all attributes by 50%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. After evolving to Tier 2, both the Abyssal Blade's basic attributes and skill effects had become much stronger than an epic weapon's. The Abyssal Bind's strengthening made it particularly effective against Tier 3 bosses. Although it would be weaker against Tier 4 bosses, the skill would at least be somewhat effective now that it had reached Tier 2. With this, my chances of clearing the ancient shrine have increased by 10%. Shifeng was very satisfied with the Abyssal Blade's upgrade. As for upgrading the Abyssal Blade to Tier 3, he decided not to worry about it for now. Even with Icarus's heart, gathering 100 eternal ice crystals would require more than a month of effort. Besides, it was only a matter of time before more players raided the Snow Rift. Their grinding efficiency would fall. Now, all he had to do was collect the required 10 eternal ice crystals for his quest. Once he had them, he needed to help his adventurer team's members level quickly to prepare them for the raid on the ancient shrine. After Shifeng returned the Abyssal Blade to its sheath, he noticed that the white smoke had gradually crystallized, eventually becoming a shard of clear crystal. When Shifeng held the crystal, he felt a chill passing through him. He began to lose 1000 HP each second. What is this thing? Shifeng was shocked. Hurriedly, he stored the crystal in his bag. Despite the brief moment he had held the crystal, his right arm had completely frozen. Had he held it for a few more seconds, the ice might have consumed his entire body. Fortunately, only his arm had frozen. Without the crystal present to absorb heat from his body, his arm quickly recovered. What a strong frost power. Fortunately, my ice resistance is high. Anyone else might have frozen to death instantly. Shifeng looked at the crystal in his bag. He then clicked to inspect the item. Although Shifeng could not say for certain if he had the highest ice resistance of any player in God's domain, there was no doubt that he was close. Moreover, he had an intermediate Azure Source Stone equipped. Tier 1 Ice-type spells and skills shouldn't affect him whatsoever. Only Tier 2 Ice-type attacks should harm him. Yet, this measly crystal had nearly turned him into an ice sculpture, devouring 1000 HP every second. An ordinary player would likely lose over 10,000 HP per second just by touching the crystal. If held for 4 or 5 seconds, even a level 45 MT with 100% of their HP would freeze to death. After Shifeng clicked to inspect the crystal's attribute panel, a loading bar appeared, notifying him that he needed to wait for 10 seconds to inspect the crystal. After the loading bar filled, one system notification after another reached his ears before Shifeng could even glance at the attribute panel. System announcement: a player has activated the new expansion pack Ice Crystal Awakening. System announcement: this new expansion pack requires a system upgrade. Please prepare to log out. The estimated duration is 4 hours. System: you have 5 minutes to log out. Please prepare to log out. What is this item? Shifeng was stunned. No matter how he looked at it, this new expansion pack had to be related to this strange crystal. There was no way for the system to announce a new expansion pack the moment he tried to inspect it otherwise. Moreover, this expansion pack required an offline update. However, Shifeng didn't give the matter too much thought. He then clicked to inspect the item's attributes, hoping to discover what kind of amazing item this crystal was. Chapter 1463 Origin Weapon. Chapter 1463 Origin Weapon. Chapter 1463 Origin Weapon. When Shifeng tapped on the crystal, a brief introduction opened before him. As he read the text, Shifeng was stunned. This is an elemental source. Shifeng couldn't believe his eyes. Source of true frost. Contains the purest frost power. Although the introduction was simple, almost everyone had known about elemental sources in the past. Any elemental source was valued more than an epic item. In fact, most people offered 2 epic items for a single crystal. However, players almost never sold them. The elemental mana within elemental sources was even purer than 7 luminaries crystals, and these items had a wide variety of uses. They could be used in forging, alchemy, engineering, magic arrays, and so on. If one used an elemental source while crafting a weapon or equipment, said item would obtain the power within the elemental source. Not only would this strengthen the item's attributes, but it would also carry a powerful original skill. If one could produce an epic weapon or equipment with an origin skill, its value would only be second to fragmented legendary items. Fragmented legendary items were extremely rare in God's domain. Even first-rate guilds were lucky to have a handful, much less second- and third-rate guilds. Hence, in the past, epic origin weapons and equipment became some of the best the various large guilds could procure in large quantities. The epic weapon Shifeng had used in the past had been refined by a Grandmaster Forger who used an elemental source. To obtain the weapon, he had spent more than half of the wealth he had accumulated throughout playing God's domain. Although hiring a Master Forger would have been cheaper, it was much safer to hire a Grandmaster. He had never expected to get his hands on an elemental source this early. Shifeng now understood how he had activated a new expansion pack that would require a 4-hour-long update. When elemental sources had made their appearance in the past, it had started a new era for lifestyle players. That had been due to the various uses for these crystals. Elemental sources could even help lifestyle classes improve their abilities. Hence, a lot of changes had to happen to the game. After the first elemental source had appeared in the game, the crystals became more common. If one were lucky, they could even obtain one from a dark gold treasure chest. No one knows the elemental source's true value yet. I can use this opportunity to send Melancholic Smile to purchase them. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng realized that he had to purchase the crystals in bulk. At first, everyone would treat the elemental source as some kind of rare material, selling it for several hundred gold apiece. By the time they realized its true value, they'd regret selling the items. Conversely, many large guilds would make a huge profit from hoarding the elemental sources. Shifeng then found a safe location and logged out of the game. The new expansion pack had been too sudden. When Shifeng opened his eyes inside the virtual gaming cabin, the sun outside the window was just beginning to set. Before Shifeng had the chance to climb out of the gaming cabin, a series of notifications bombarded his senses. They only stopped after the notification sound repeated several dozen times. Taking his time, Shifeng left to get something to eat and drink. He only read through the messages after settling down to eat at the table. Contact between the ice crystal world and the continent of God's domain was not possible. Hence, he had instructed Melancholic Smile and Gentle Snow to keep him up to date via offline messages. However, to obtain the required elemental ice crystals as quickly as possible, he had remained in the game for 3 days straight. They're finally willing to let go, huh? Shifeng smiled as he read a message from Gentle Snow. Recently, nothing major had occurred in God's domain. The most noteworthy development was that Gentle Snow had finally captured Hidden Fog Town. Meanwhile, Zero Wings branch guild in the Black Dragon Empire had recruited 70,000 additional members. The number might not be significant for a first-rate guild, but it was a different story for Zero Wing. After all, Zero Wing's recruitment requirements were quite strict. Players capable of passing the entrance test would be elite players in the public's eyes. It was impressive that a branch guild had recruited so many members so quickly. But Shifeng wasn't surprised. What made him smile was the news that the companies that had supported Ouroboros had finally agreed to sell the training center to Gentle Snow. She had already begun the price negotiations. Once both sides finished signing the necessary contracts, Ouroboros's training center would become Zero Wing's main headquarters. In the future, Zero Wing could recruit large batches of internal members without worrying about space. As Shifeng browsed through the other messages, his virtual gaming cabin's offline communicator rang. The caller ID belonged to Phoenix Rain. Shifeng reconnected to the game and entered his offline rest space. After doing so, he accepted the call. Immediately, a virtual screen appeared before him. The screen showcased Phoenix Rain, who currently wore a set of exquisite, blue mage robes. She had already reached level 48, and excluding Zero Wings members, she could hold the top position on the Black Dragon Empire's ranking list. Phoenix Pavilion Master, to what do I owe the pleasure? Has something urgent happened? Shifeng asked curiously. Indeed, something has happened. I've been competing with 9 Dragons Emperor on a quest, but for some reason, something has changed on his side. Not only did he complete the quest before I did, but he's also completed the quest much sooner than expected. Many of the guild elders have begun to side with him. Now, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion just so happens to be activating some ancient ruin. I hope that guild leader Black Flame can lend me a few experts on the raid, Phoenix Raid said straightforwardly, not bothering to hide anything from Shifeng. As for the remuneration, I'll sell you a high-potential shop in the Apocalypse Empire's capital. What do you say? She had an acute understanding of Zero Wing's experts. This was especially true for Zhao Yueru, who had participated in the Black Dragon Empire's ranking competition. There was also Aqua Rose to consider, who had put on a shocking performance during the siege war in Green Rain Town. If experts like these women joined her team, she'd have a much higher chance of successfully raiding the ancient ruin her guild had found. Shifeng was surprised to hear Phoenix Rain's offer. He had never thought that this woman would be generous enough to sell an imperial capital shop for a handful of experts. Such shops were incredibly hard to come by. Many organizations offered 2 or 3 times the market price for them, but only a fool would willingly sell an imperial capital shop so early in the game. Ancient ruins? Can you tell me which ancient ruins you intend to raid? Shifeng asked after calming down. We've activated the Apocalypse Empire's Sunset Forest, Phoenix Rain answered, confused as to why he'd ask such a question. I see. Realization immediately dawned on Shifeng. After giving the matter some thought, he said, if you wish to borrow some manpower, then you shall have it. However, I have a better proposal. I'll help you clear the ruins. In return, I want 20% of the resources we obtain during the raid. God's domain had countless ancient ruins, many of which stored various items and materials that had been hidden since before the Great Destruction. Normally, these items wouldn't surface on the market. Meanwhile, the Apocalypse Empire's Sunset Forest had been particularly famous in the past due to its ancient origin wood, a top-tier material used in ships' construction. Phoenix Rain couldn't help but frown when she heard Shifeng's counteroffer. Seeing the man's confidence, she had to ask, that's a level 50 to level 60. Grade 1 ancient ruin. Are you confident in clearing it? Will you believe me if I say that I'm 60% confident? Shifeng understood that she had many questions, but he had no solid explanation. After all, he couldn't possibly tell her that he had learned about the Sunset Forest during his previous life, or that he knew certain tricks to raid the ruin. Chapter 1464 Mutated Magic Array Scroll. Chapter 1464 Mutated Magic Array Scroll. Chapter 1464 Mutated Magic Array Scroll. Phoenix Rain hesitated for a moment after hearing Shifeng's answer. Nine Dragons Emperor had activated the quest for the ancient ruin before she could, so he had a considerable advantage in the raid. Hence, she had decided to borrow experts from Shifeng. After all, the resources inside the ancient ruin would be of considerable help to the contest on Thunder Island. An ancient ruin was like a land of treasure. It was a type of secret land. By completing special quests, one could obtain a key to open the secret land's gates. Since Nine Dragons Emperor had completed the activation quest, he had obtained the first key. As a Grade 1 ancient ruin, the Sunset Forest only allowed each team to enter with 1,000 members. In addition, there was a time and level limit. The ancient ruin hid bountiful treasure, and one could obtain as many items as they wanted within the allotted time. Players raiding the ancient ruin for the first time would gain the most. Only, Shifeng's asking price was a little too high. She had already invested a lot of manpower and resources, yet this man wanted 20% of the harvest. Most importantly, the Sunset Forest was a Grade 1 ancient ruin. It would be far more difficult to raid than a 100-man, Hell Mode team dungeon of the same level. She wasn't confident that Zero Wing had the strength to raid the ancient ruin. Take some time to consider the matter. In any case, Sunset Forest will activate on the same day as the contest for Thunder Island, with one in the morning and the other at night. There's still some time, Shifeng said. You know the activation time? Phoenix Rain asked, confused. Sunset Forest's activation time was a secret. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had only learned about it after obtaining the secret land key. The activation time was also the reason that she was so anxious. If she could claim the ruin's treasures, she could boost her force's combat power, increasing her chances of success on the island. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in such a rush to gather experts. I've read about it in an ancient tome. The tome also mentioned something about the final guardian boss, Shifeng said casually. In reality, he had never read about the ancient ruin in any book, but certain ancient tomes did mention various ruins in the game. He had used the lie as a way to convince Phoenix Rain that he had a method to raid the Sunset Forest. An ancient tome? Realization dawned on Phoenix Rain. The Great Pavilion Master had learned about the Sunset Forest from some ancient book, as well. Only after his research had the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion investigated the ancient ruin and its activation quest. It wasn't unusual to learn that Shifeng had learned about the Sunset Forest in the same way. All right, I agree to your offer. However, the precondition is that you can actually raid the Sunset Forest. That's only natural. Shifeng nodded. All right. We'll meet up tomorrow in Apocalypse City, Phoenix Rain responded before disconnecting the call. Following which, Shifeng started to prepare. First, he sent Melancholic Smile a message, getting her to send some people around the continent to purchase elemental sources, through they couldn't spend more than 300 gold per item. That price was the equivalent of an epic ranked material item. If the price exceeded that amount, others could become suspicious. After taking care of that, Shifeng notified Aqua Rose to lead a team to a neutral map, the Flaming Rain Mountains, to grind for flame potions. The potion was necessary to raid the Sunset Forest. As Shifeng finished delegating and waited patiently for God's Domain system update to finish, a call came in from Liang Jing. Head Instructor, the White Tiger Dojo has sent someone to see you again. The representative has stated that the White Tiger Dojo has agreed to your conditions and would like to invite you to discuss the details, Liang Jing reported. They've agreed. Shifeng suddenly remembered his conversation with the White Tiger Dojo's Jiang Tianyuan regarding his price for nurturing their experts. He then revealed a smile and said, "Tell the representative that I've doubled my price. They can take it or leave it." Even if the White Tiger Dojo had talented members, training them to take on the Trial Tower's 6th floor wouldn't be a simple task. Nurturing 500 6th floor experts for 50 bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid wasn't a worthwhile trade. Had the White Tiger Dojo agreed to his offer earlier, he would have stayed true to his word. However, times had changed. Understood. Liang Jing nodded. Following which, Liang Jing conveyed Shifeng's decision to Xie Chiwen, who had waited in a reception room. What? Double the price? Xie was dumbfounded when he heard the decision. He shouted, "Why doesn't he just rob a bank instead? Does he really doubt that the White Tiger Dojo can train its own experts? I apologize, but this is our head instructor's will. I can't do anything about his decisions," Liang Jing said. In reality, she was curious about what business Shifeng had with the White Tiger Dojo to warrant one visit after another from a genius like Xie. Good. Just wait. He'll regret this decision. Xie then left in a fit of rage. After 4 hours, Shifeng returned to his virtual gaming cabin and logged back into God's domain. Upon entering God's domain, Shifeng contacted Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and the others, having them select experts from the adventurer team to form a 100-man team. He then used a return scroll to teleport to Coldwind City. He had planned to help Lifeless Thorn and the others level up some more before raiding the ancient shrine, opening the teleportation channel. But Phoenix Rain's request had forced him to move his plans up a few days. While he had been out killing the Snow Rift's field bosses, he has sent some people to the library to research the ancient shrine. Because of them, he now had a better understanding of the area. After returning to Coldwind City, Shifeng returned to the adventurer team's residence and retrieved a large amount of materials. He then began to produce the 9-star Polar Domain Magic Array. He and his team had zero chance of defeating the Guardian boss in a head-on confrontation. He had planned to use magic arrays to suppress the boss and rely on Zerg tactics to distract it while damaging it with miniature ballistas. However, the situation had changed. He now had the source of true frost, which was also why he had made his promise to Phoenix Rain. Elemental sources contained a purer energy than that in 7 luminaries crystals. Naturally, said energy was useful in many aspects, the most beneficial of which was in forging weapons and equipment. Similarly, elemental sources could be used in crafting magic arrays. A magic array would receive a massive power boost if crafted with an elemental source. Unfortunately, they were one-time use items, and using such a rare material was the epitome of extravagance. But Shifeng couldn't care less. The sooner he opened the teleportation channel, the sooner he could open trade between God's Domain's continent and the Ice Crystal world. Doing so would be far more profitable than Stone Forest Town. In the quiet workshop, Shifeng retrieved one material after another. He then began to produce magic array scrolls. Very quickly, Shifeng had a stack of 9 magic array scrolls. When he reached the final step, adding magic crystals to the scrolls, Shifeng stopped abruptly and took a deep breath. Rather than selecting the magic crystals, he retrieved the source of extreme true frost from his bag. The moment Shifeng did so, his arm froze solid. He very quickly placed the elemental source in the center of the scrolls. The source of extreme true frost gasified rapidly. Streams of cold mist flowed into the stack of magic array scrolls. Following which, the scroll's power began to increase. By the time the magic array scrolls absorbed every drop of power from the elemental source, the workshop's temperature had dropped drastically. Even with his high ice resistance, Shifeng couldn't help but shiver. The originally dark purple magic array scrolls lightened to an icy blue. Had Shifeng not been prepared, using Earth Dragon skin as the scroll's base material, the magic array scrolls would have exploded from so much energy. Shifeng waited until the turbulent power within the magic array scrolls calmed before storing them. Magic array scrolls produced with elemental sources are pretty impressive. I wonder how the effects have changed. Shifeng clicked to inspect the new 9-star Polar Domain magic array scrolls. Chapter 1465, Top Tier, 8-piece set. Chapter 1465, Top Tier, 8-piece set. Chapter 1465, Top Tier, 8-piece set. So, this is the power of an elemental source. Shifeng stared at the icy blue scroll's attribute panel in shock. The 9-star Polar Domain was an intermediate magic array. Normally, it had no problems containing and suppressing Great Lord-ranked monsters. It was even somewhat effective against Grand Lords. Of course, mythic monsters could easily break free with a few attacks. However, after improving the 9-star Polar Domain with the source of extreme true frost, The magic array had undergone a heaven-defying change, although it still required 9 players to activate and maintain it. Now, it could suppress trapped enemies' attributes by 70%. It could even weaken a mythic monster by as much as 50%. Most advanced magic arrays could barely suppress a mythic monster's attributes by 30%. Now, the mutated 9-star polar domain magic array could rival a master magic array. It's a pity that it's only a one-time use item. It would be great if I could use it a few more times. Shifeng was slightly disappointed. With such a powerful magic array, he could lead Zero Wing's main force to a neutral map, hunting its various mythic ranked field bosses. The harvest they could gain from securing the first kills would be beyond imagination. However, Shifeng only played with the idea. He knew full well that the main god system would not permit such a thing. After he finished the scrolls, Shifeng hurried to Cold Wind City's Forging Association, intending to upgrade his team's equipment. The Forging Association in Cold Wind City was different from those on God's Domain's continent. Similar to Cold Wind City's library, the Forging Association was ancient. It was likely older than Star Moon Kingdom itself. However, it was due to this Forging Association that the Ice Crystal World's crafting standards were significantly higher than in his home world. At first, Shifeng had assumed it was due to the abundance of rare materials in the Ice Crystal World, but in truth, that was only part of the reason. The real reason for these players' success was the Forging Association. The Forging Association here could rival Titan City's Lifestyle Association. Only, it lacked the massive databank and high mana density. In addition, the Forging Association in Cold Wind City had the Forging Guidance System, which allowed players to purchase one-time use forging designs with magic crystals. For level 45, fine gold forging designs, the prices ranged between 10 and 50 magic crystals. For level 45, dark gold forging designs, the prices ranged between 100 to 150 magic crystals. Although these one-time use designs were expensive, they gave players an advantage that wasn't available to those who learned from the real forging designs. These players could increase their success rates with magic crystals. For fine gold weapons and equipment, players could increase their success rate to a maximum of 25%. As for dark gold weapons and equipment, players could increase it to 15%. This was a considerable boon to advanced forgers. With the 15% bonus on top of their original success rate, an advanced forger could easily achieve an overall success rate of 30% or above when forging a dark gold item. If one avoided mistakes during the forging process, they could craft one dark gold weapon or piece of equipment for every 3 tries. However, while mass-producing fine gold items was easy, the same couldn't be said for dark gold items. It was far more difficult to obtain the necessary materials, which generally dropped from high-level Great Lords and Grand Lords. Not every team could kill monsters of such caliber. It was also more difficult due to the required amount of magic crystals. To increase one's forging success rate with dark gold weapons or equipment by 15%, they'd have to pay an additional 100 magic crystals. Including the cost of the forging design, each attempt could easily cost anywhere from 200 to 250 magic crystals, and that was excluding any magic crystals required to produce the item itself. While coins were easy to earn at this stage of the game, magic crystals were not. Although Cold Wind City's players had an abundance of fine gold weapons and equipment, they lacked dark gold ranked items. Only the city's 2 large guilds had a substantial stock. Fortunately, Shifeng wasn't concerned about either issue. During the last 3 days, he had spent his time killing level 50+ Great Lords and Grand Lords, obtaining a large stock of materials. As for magic crystals, he still had over 30,000 on him. That was more than enough to produce weapons and equipment. "Hello, sir. How may I be of service?" An NPC receptionist greeted Shifeng sweetly. "I wish to rent a special mana forging room for 2 hours, Shifeng stated. The mana forging rooms had greater mana density than the average forging room. Though they weren't on the level of a meditation room of the same rank, they could improve a player's concentration. "Understood, sir. That will be 50 silver, the NPC receptionist said as she offered Shifeng a key. Handing over the 50 silver coins, Shifeng grabbed the key and went to the Forging Association's top floor. The Ice Crystal World's forging guidance system is amazing, Shifeng thought as he opened the forging guidance system for the special mana forging room. Previously, he had thought that the forging guidance system only offered fine gold and dark gold weapon and equipment designs. Now, he discovered that it also sold set equipment designs. As Shifeng wondered why he hadn't seen anyone in Cold Wind City wearing fine gold or dark gold set equipment, his eyes fell on the designs' price tags. The designs for level 45, dark gold equipment only cost 100 magic crystals. To purchase the designs for 6 pieces, one would have to spend 600 crystals. However, the design for a 6-piece, level 45, dark gold set equipment cost 1,800 crystals, 2,500 crystals for an 8-piece version. Moreover, the design was a one-time use item, it would disappear regardless of the player's success. Not even a first-rate guild's leader would mess around with so many magic crystals, much less guilds like Centurion Dynasty and Matchless Family. Based on magic crystals' market price, each attempt to forge an 8-piece, dark gold set equipment would cost over 700 gold. Moreover, the forging success rate for set equipment was much lower than that of individual items of the same level and rank. Even the forging guidance system only allowed players to temporarily increase their forging success rate by 7% for a price. An advanced forger would be lucky if their base success rate reached 8% with level 45, dark gold set equipment. Most would have a total success rate of only 15%. With such a low chance, it'd be a miracle if a forger succeeded once with every 10 tries. Even wealthy guilds and players wouldn't dare waste their money so extravagantly. With this, my trip has definitely been worth the trouble. Shifeng's eyes glittered as he gazed at the various dark gold set equipment designs the forging guidance system displayed. It would be very difficult for an advanced forger to produce a dark gold set equipment, but to a master forger such as Shifeng, it'd be easy. His base success rate had already reached 20%. Including the Book of Forging, the Mysterious Flame, the Master Forger's Insignia, and the Black Steel Insignia, he could easily achieve a success rate of more than 35%. With the forging guidance system, that would put his forging success rate at over 42%. Following which, Shifeng bought the design for an 8-piece, level 45, dark gold set equipment for shield warriors and began to craft. Shifeng started to refine and shape one material after another. Due to the abyssal blade, the density of the ambient mana rose even higher, increasing his concentration. Before Shifeng knew it, he had produced the protector set. This set's attributes are really powerful. No wonder it costs 2,500 magic crystals per attempt. Shifeng was astonished as he inspected the protector set's attributes. The set's basic attributes could already rival that of individual level 50, dark gold equipment. The set effects would greatly enhance a shield warrior's skills as well. Following which, Shifeng forged one of each of the following sets: Burning Fire set, Courage set, and Icicle set. All 3 were 8-piece, level 45, dark gold set equipment and were meant for the Berserker, Guardian Knight, and Swordsman classes, respectively. After producing the 4 sets, Shifeng couldn't bear to push his luck. Producing the 4 sets had already cost him over 15,000 magic crystals. If he tried to forge more, he'd run out of magic crystals. He could only select a few level 45 dark gold weapons and equipment to craft at this point. After forging over 40 items, Shifeng noticed that his 2-hour session was almost over. He packed up and hurried to the Snow Rift to meet up with Lifeless Thorn and the others. The Snow Rift's core was in the middle of a mountainous region. Solitary 9, Lifeless Thorn, and the other team members had gathered there. "Commander, I've selected the required members. We are ready to move out on your command," Solitary 9 reported upon seeing Shifeng approach. "We have also investigated the cave entrance's guardian boss. It is a level 67 Grand Lord. Its speed, attack power, and perception are extraordinary. We sent one of our scouts ahead, and the boss discovered him before he was within 150 yards of the monster. He died instantly. Even though our MTS tried to tank it, we only lasted 2 hits. With our team's current strength, I'm afraid." Fear filled everyone's hearts. The strongest boss they had ever fought was only a level 60 Grand Lord, and they had already witnessed this level 67 boss's power. To put it simply, its destructive power was terrifying. I understand, Shifeng said after watching the battle video Solitary 9 had sent him. He then took the weapons and equipment he had forged from his bag and said, "For now, put these on. We'll raid the boss once you've gotten used to them. We're replacing our equipment." Every member of the team stared at Shifeng in confusion. They didn't understand why he wanted them to replace their equipment. They already wore the best in Cold Wind City, and they were used to their old weapons and equipment. "These are... Commander, how did you get these?" However, when these players saw the items Shifeng had given them, their eyes widened in shock. Chapter 1466, First Kill Jackpot. Chapter 1466, First Kill Jackpot. Chapter 1466, First Kill Jackpot. How is this possible? Both Lifeless Thorn and Solitary 9 were stupefied by the items Shifeng had brought them. If Shifeng had revealed a bunch of level 45, dark gold weapons and equipment, they would have only been surprised at how many dark gold items he had obtained. But when they saw the 4 dark gold sets, as far as they knew, Cold Wind City didn't have a single available dark gold set, not to mention level 45 dark gold set equipment. Not even Centurion Dynasty or Matchless Family had succeeded to forge a full set, yet Shifeng had brought 4. Moreover, they were all 8-piece sets. 9, Lifeless, Whistle, and Madness, you 4 will be the team's main force, so put these sets on, Shifeng instructed his players after glancing over the team. After the Azura Adventurer team had developed for some time, Lifeless Thorn had finally persuaded Dark Madness, Waveheart's commander, to join. As a result, the rest of the Waveheart Adventurer team had followed his lead, helping Azura become Cold Wind City's bona fide #1 adventure team. At this point, Azura had over 2,000 official members with over 10,000 reserve members. Not even Centurion Dynasty or Matchless Family had so many experts. Moreover, due to Dark Madness becoming a member, they had solved the problem of Azura's main force lacking MTS. Dark Madness, the city's #1 Guardian Knight, was the reason Waveheart had become Cold Wind City's #1 adventurer team. Due to his presence, Waveheart had easily raided one powerful dungeon and field boss after another. Hearing Shifeng's orders, the 4 nodded enthusiastically before joyfully replacing their old equipment with the 8-piece sets. No one on the team complained. After all, these 4 players' strength was irrefutable. If their team wanted to get the most out of the dark gold ranked sets, the best players among them should use the items. Don't be jealous. I will reward whoever reaches the refinement realm with even better dark gold set equipment, Shifeng said, smiling when he saw the other team members' envious expressions. Commander, are you serious? Everyone breathlessly turned to Shifeng. These 8-piece dark gold sets were the best available in Cold Wind City. They dreamed of obtaining such a set, not to mention even better equipment. Of course. I always keep my word. As long as you reach the refinement realm, you can come to me directly, Shifeng said, nodding. He wasn't lying. The sets he had given to Lifeless Thorn and the others were merely level 45, dark gold set equipment. Meanwhile, he could head to Titan City and purchase the level 50, dark gold ranked magic light set equipment design. In the past, he had only been an advanced forger, so it would have been very difficult to forge the set, but no, he was a master forger. It'd be easy as long as he had enough materials. When the team members heard Shifeng's confirmation, an intense fighting spirit burned in their eyes. They were even more inspired to reach the refinement realm. After a quick break to switch out the old equipment with the new, Shifeng prepared his team to raid the 3-headed Frostwolf, the cave entrance's guardian boss. 3-headed Frostwolf, elemental creature, Grand Lord. Level 67. HP 130 000 130 000. Despite the upgrade to better weapons and equipment, these players stared anxiously at the 3-headed Frostwolf, standing over 20 meters tall, as their hearts began to pound. Although their basic attributes had increased, defeating a Grand Lord that was over 20 levels higher than they were was unrealistic. 9. Dark, you'll be on support. Everyone else, spread out alongside the boss, Shifeng commanded the team as he watched the sleeping Frostwolf. He then took out the Bible of Darkness and activated demon summoning. With the team's current strength, it was impossible to raid the ancient shrine. However, he had the Bible of Darkness, so he could, more or less, make up for the lack. Following which, a massive demon gate appeared before Shifeng. A Tier 3 demon wielding a dark blue greatsword then emerged. Fear Demon, Dark Creature, Demon. Level 73. HP 23 500 000 23 500 000. When the Fear Demon arrived, Lifeless Thorn and his companions gasped, wary of the human-like creature. Although the Fear Demon wasn't as powerful as the three-headed Frostwolf in terms of attributes, its intellect was much higher. To players, a high-intellect monster with low attributes was far more frightening than a dumb monster with high attributes. Don't be afraid. This demon is under my control, Shifeng hurriedly explained. The Fear Demon will tank the Frostwolf. You just need to deal as much damage as possible. Commander, this is your summoned creature. Solitary 9 and the others were astonished. Shifeng had already impressed them when he had defeated Matchless Family's 10,000-man army by himself, and now they found out that he could summon such a powerful demon. These players only recovered their wits after some time. They then moved into position. Once everyone was where they needed to be, Shifeng commanded, "Charge." Suddenly, the Fear Demon's wings shuddered. It moved within the three-headed Frostwolf's perception range in the blink of an eye. Taking advantage of the opportunity while the Frostwolf woke, Shifeng directed the Fear Demon to use the Tier 3 skill, Darkness Blade. 3 massive blades of shadow appeared above the Guardian boss, smashing into the drowsy Grand Lord's heads a moment after. -1,576,487, -1,754,374, -1,945,344. Each subsequent blade dealt more damage than the previous, slamming the boss, who had just stood up, back to the ground. So powerful. Why does it seem like the commander doesn't need us to deal with this three-headed Frostwolf? The team members gasped when they saw the damages above the Frostwolf's heads. In a single attack, the boss had lost nearly 5% of its HP. Awoo! The three-headed Frostwolf opened its eyes after it hit the ground, revealing 3 pairs of menacing, crimson eyes. Glaring at the Fear Demon, the Guardian boss spread its jaws. Each of the three-headed Frostwolf's mouths fired a beam of frost simultaneously, freezing everything before the Grand Lord. The Fear Demon froze instantly, losing over 2 million HP. To demons, who possessed very high magic resistance, the damage was horrific. The three-headed Frostwolf then advanced, quickly reaching the demon and swiping its claws. Boom! As the dust cleared from the explosion, it revealed a massive crater where the Fear Demon had stood. The Frostwolf's attack had shaken the Azura members' willpower. Fortunately, the Fear Demon had broken free from the ice and used its greatsword to defend itself in time, only receiving several tens of thousands of damage. Seeing this, Azura's members grew nervous. Compared to the battle before them, their previous fights had been child's play. Only a few players on the team had remained calm. Lifeless Thorn had even made his way to the three-headed Frostwolf's rear, using Chop with his Thunder Spear. As Lifeless Thorn attacked, one instance of over -10,000 damage appeared above the Grand Lord's head after another. Meanwhile, Solitary 9, Dark Madness, and Cleansing Whistle dealt around -8,000 damage with their attacks. Although they couldn't compare to the Fear Demon's damage, theirs was better than their companions, who only dealt around -4,000 damage. Meanwhile, Shifeng arrived by the three-headed Frostwolf's side. Thundering Flash, Thunder Flame Explosion, Shadow Blade, Flame Burst. Shifeng landed a series of skills, each of his attacks dealing over -100,000 damage. His damage was only second to the Fear Demon's. For a time, the three-headed Frostwolf and Fear Demon fought fiercely. Although the Fear Demon was no match for the Grand Lord, it received constant healing from the healers at the rear and could continue to tank the Guardian boss, allowing everyone else to chip away at the Grand Lord's HP. 70%. 50%. 30%. Time passed quickly. From the beginning of the battle to its end, the Fear Demon kept the three-headed Frostwolf occupied, preventing the Grand Lord from dealing any significant damage to the rest of the team. Even when the boss entered its berserk state, the team easily coped, with the Guardian Knights casting protection blessing on the Fear Demon. When the three-headed Frostwolf had less than 1% HP remaining, Shifeng activated Divine Providence and ended its life with Flame Burst. When the three-headed Frostwolf's HP reached 0, its three heads released agonizing wails that echoed throughout the canyon. The boss then disintegrated into countless particles of light, leaving behind over 100 items in its place. The Grand Lord's death also granted more EXP than Shifeng had expected, and several team members leveled up on the spot. System. Congratulations. You have obtained the first kill of the three-headed Frostwolf, the King of the Icefields. Rewards doubled. Chapter 1467, Skill that Overcomes Tears. Chapter 1467, Skill that Overcomes Tears. Chapter 1467, Skill that Overcomes Tears. The boss dropped so many items. We hit a jackpot. Is this for real? This is the first time I've seen a jackpot. Look. There are weapons and equipment among the loot. Centurion Dynasty and Matchless Family will die from envy when they hear about this. Everyone gaped at the miniature mountain of items. Although they were shocked that they had actually killed the three-headed Frostwolf, its loot was even more astounding. In God's domain, monsters at level 50 and above would have drastically reduced drop rates. Even the monsters in forbidden lands like the Snow Rift usually dropped 4 or 5 items. Moreover, the majority of those items were materials. When they had farmed level 60 Grand Lords, they had only obtained 10 or so items from each boss. Yet, this Grand Lord ranked three-headed Frostwolf had dropped over 100 items. Why wouldn't they be surprised? Everyone, rest up. We'll enter the cave soon, Shifeng said. He could not help but shake his head and chuckle when he saw his team members' excited expressions. The weapons and equipment a level 67 Grand Lord were about as tempting as a level 45, dark gold set equipment. It was common knowledge that monsters beyond level 50 rarely dropped good weapons or equipment. This was particularly true for the Ice Crystal world. Although the forging guidance system offered forging designs for level 50+ items, they were far more expensive than the level 45 variants. Most importantly, one's forging success rate would drastically decrease when attempting to craft such high-level items. It was already far more difficult to forge level 50, fine gold equipment than it was to forge the level 45 version, much less level 50+, dark gold equipment. Among the 100+ items, over 60% consisted of materials for forging level 50+ weapons and equipment. There were also over a dozen Master Mana Recovery Potions, Master Recovery Potions, and Attribute Gemstones of various kinds, 5 Tier 2 Magic Scrolls, and 2 Tier 3 Magic Scrolls. One of the Tier 3 Magic Scrolls was a group instantaneous teleportation scroll, and the other was a defensive magic scroll. 5 pieces of level 60, fine gold equipment and 2 pieces of level 60, dark gold equipment had also dropped. However, among these dropped items, one caught Shifeng's eye, a thick, golden book. The book's cover didn't offer any clues about its contents. However, when Shifeng examined the book, he was ecstatic. What a surprise! I never thought that a mere gatekeeper would drop this thing. My trip to the Ice Crystal world has been pretty profitable. Shifeng's eyes shone as he gazed at the golden book. The book was neither a design nor a recipe. It wasn't some sort of treasure map or special item, either. It was only a skill book. However, despite being only a skill book, it was even more valuable than the super rare Berserk skill books. Players had collectively referred to this kind of book as a combination skill book in the past. Combination skill books had been as valuable as epic items. Shifeng had tried to bid for a combination skill book in the past, but in the end, a first-rate guild had won the book for 50,000 magic crystals. Shadow had only saved 30,000 magic crystals. Shifeng had never expected to obtain a combination skill book from killing the three-headed Frostwolf. Multiple players could learn from a single combination skill book. Some only allowed 2 players to learn the skill, while 3 to 5 players could learn from others. If players activated a combination skill with the specified number of players, they could exert frighteningly destructive power with the skill. In the past, this had been the various large guilds' main method of dealing with powerful bosses. After all, God's domain had many incredibly powerful monsters. Even with the aid of magic arrays, players were no match for these bosses. During these situations, combination skills worked wonders. However, combination skills' strength and effects varied. For example, combination skill books that could sell for tens of thousands of magic crystals generally contained skills that required 4 or 5 players to activate. With such combination skills, even Tier 1 players could severely injure mythic monsters, becoming far more powerful than Tier 3 magic scrolls. Generally, one could only obtain combination skill books from mythic monsters or dark gold treasures found in level 60 maps and above. He never thought that he would actually get one from a Grand Lord. Following which, Shi Feng inspected the skill book. Triple Frost Moon, combination skill. Requires 3 melee classes to activate. A single target, attack skill that requires 3 players. Shi Feng's excitement grew after reading the introduction. Normally, 2-man combination skills only allowed players the power to overcome a single tier. Meanwhile, Tier 1 players could even injure Grand Lords with a 3-man combination skill. Based on the market prices in Shi Feng's previous life, the Triple Frost Moon skill book could easily sell for over 20,000 magic crystals. Combination skills were different from magic scrolls in that they were not one-time use items. They could be used indefinitely, although they did have a cooldown. 3 Tier 1 players using a combination skill were as powerful as a Tier 3 spell. The skill could even be used multiple times during a boss battle. A skill like this could significantly increase a team's overall combat power. However, Shi Feng had no intention of learning this combination skill himself. Instead, he gave it to Lifeless Thorn, Solitary 9, and Dark Madness. "Commander, if we learn this skill, what about you?" After Solitary 9 read the Triple Frost Moon's introduction, he realized how powerful the skill was. It was the equivalent of Tier 1 players being able to use Tier 3 skills limitlessly. If Shi Feng took the lead during the activation process, he could exert even more power with the skill. "I have a Tier 3 demon. Moreover, I can't always accompany you in dungeon and boss raids. If you 3 learn the skill, the team will be even stronger. So, it's better if you learn it," Shi Feng explained. The Triple Frost Moon needed 3 people to activate. It wouldn't work if one of the players were missing. Meanwhile, he frequently operated solo, which made it impossible for him to exhibit the combination skill's true potential. He had no choice but to pass the skill up. Lifeless Thorn and the others were already considerably strong. Their lack of suitable weapons, equipment, and combat experience were the only things holding them back. However, after spending time under his guidance and watching his demonstrations over the past few days, Lifeless Thorn and the others had significantly improved their monotonous attack methods, raising their combat standards by leaps and bounds. Right now, Lifeless Thorn's combat standards were nearly on par with Aqua Rose and Gentle Snows. With a combination skill, his ability in dungeon raids might surpass the 2 women's. Hearing Shi Feng's explanation, Solitary 9 and the others finally agreed. To someone who could summon a Tier 3 demon, a 3-man combination skill was superfluous. After everyone in the team had rested, Shi Feng led them into the cave and followed the map towards the ancient shrine. The shrine's exact location was hidden. Although the map indicated that it was within the cave's interior was complex. The cave system was like a natural maze. If not for the map, Shi Feng might not have found the ancient shrine's cave in the first place, much less locating the shrine itself. The team frequently ran into frenzied monsters that attacked without hesitation after they entered the cave. They even ran into the occasional Grand Lord. Although these Grand Lords weren't as strong as the 3-headed Frostwolf, they weren't easy to deal with. The team had to bide their time as they slowly whittled down the boss's HPs. After 10 hours of exploring the cave system, Shi Feng and the others finally reached a dark cavern. During their journey, They had killed 8 level 65 Grand Lords and countless chieftains and lords. These monsters had done nothing but provide an abundance of EXP. At this point, Lifeless Thorn and a few others were level 50, and Shifeng was only a step away from reaching level 59. However, this was all due to the team securing these monsters' first kill. Disappointingly, these monsters hadn't dropped as much loot as the three-headed Frostwolf. They had only dropped level 60, secret silver and fine gold weapons and equipment. Combined, these items' total value was nothing compared to the Guardian boss's loot. A towering, purple gold shrine sat in the center of the dark cavern. It radiated a sacred aura, and as players gazed up at the shrine, they shuddered. When Shifeng and his companions moved within 500 yards of the shrine, they heard the sound of a system notification. System, you have discovered an ancient shrine. As they were alerted of the system notification, a magic array appeared on the ground in front of the shrine, illuminating the cavern. Following which, a 10-meter-tall, humanoid robot emerged. The instant this humanoid robot appeared, everyone, including Shifeng, felt a stifling pressure weigh them down. Even an expert like Lifeless Thorn paled under this pressure. The weaker team members nearly lost their footing. Chapter 1468, Raiding a Mythic. Chapter 1468, Raiding a Mythic. Chaptering 1468, Raiding a Mythic. Mythic. Before they even checked the Titan Warrior statistics, the pressure it radiated overwhelmed the team. Now that they had seen its information, they were shocked. No one throughout Cold Wind City, not even an expert like Lifeless Thorn, had ever seen a mythic monster. Now that they stood before one, they were terrified to stand within 500 yards of the Titan Warrior, not to mention attempt to fight the thing. This was the first time they had felt anything like this since they joined God's domain. Their minds screamed at them, warning that if they proceeded, they would dance with death. Commander, this monster is too powerful. We can't afford to provoke a monster like this yet. Do we have to fight it? Solitary 9 asked, his complexion ashen. Before he had encountered the Titan Warrior, he had thought that it might be possible for their team to defeat a mythic monster. However, after experiencing the Titan Warrior's near-tangible killing intent and absolute power, he knew that Tier 1 players had no hope against it. The Titan Warrior's battle recovery alone would regenerate 3,600,000 HP every 5 seconds. If their team couldn't deal over 720,000 damage each second, their team would never kill it, even if the Titan Warrior stood there and watched them try. This wasn't a battle. This was a suicide mission. A mechanical life form? Shifeng fell into deep thought as he watched the Titan Warrior. Although he had known that the final Guardian boss would be a mythic monster, he hadn't expected it to be a mechanical life form. Mechanical life forms were famed for their high defense, strength, and magic resistance. Because of these stats, they were known to be the best guard monsters available. Even super guilds struggled against mechanical lifeform bosses since they couldn't take advantage of their collection of high-tiered magic scrolls and mana pulse cannons. Even magic arrays had little effect against these creatures. Players could only defeat a mechanical lifeform with brute strength. There simply weren't any loopholes. Commander, are we still going to fight that thing? Lifeless Thorn asked hesitantly. Before they had come here, Shifeng had told Azura's upper echelons that they could travel to another world if they finished this quest. They wouldn't have to stay cooped up in Cold Wind City, but as they faced an insurmountable mythic monster, even Lifeless Thorn felt helpless. This wasn't some random dungeon. If they died in this cave, they would lose an entire level. At their level, recovering the lost EXP would take a lot of time. Let's make an attempt, Shifeng said after giving the matter some thought. The attempt? Lifeless Thorn and the others were slightly confused. Shifeng took a Tier 2 summoning scroll from his bag and summoned a Tier 2 Gale Cheetah. He then used Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger forward while he directed the Gale Cheetah to circle the boss. He wanted to test the Titan Warrior's reaction and turning speed. Although mechanical lifeforms had high defense and strength, they also had a glaring weakness, slow reaction and turning speed. Of course, this was only compared to monsters of the same rank. A mythic ranked mechanical lifeform's reaction and turning speed should be higher than a Grand Lord's of the same level. As his doppelganger approached the Titan warrior, Shifeng sat down and focused on controlling his summoned twin. 400 yards. 300 yards. When the doppelganger moved within 200 yards of the guardian boss, the previously immobile mythic monster abruptly opened its eyes, revealing two dazzling, crimson orbs. It advanced on the doppelganger so quickly that by the time the watching crowd reacted, the boss had crossed 40 yards. When the boss had moved, it had created a massive crater where it had originally stood. It looked like a cannon had bombarded the area. So fast. Upon seeing the Titan warrior approach, Shifeng immediately had his doppelganger activate defensive blade. In the blink of an eye, the boss reached the doppelganger, swinging its colossal greatsword down at the invader. The moment the greatsword began to descend, the doppelganger jumped out of from the weapon's path. However, the Titan warrior nimbly adjusted its attack trajectory halfway through the swing, slicing at the doppelganger, who had yet to land. Boom! Immediately, a deep gash over 30 yards long tore through the ground. Although Shifeng's doppelganger had nullified the attack with defensive blade, the boss's strength was overwhelming. The impact threw the doppelganger over 20 yards away. Azura's members gasped. Even lifeless Thorn wore a grim expression. It was just too fast. His eyes couldn't keep up with the Titan warrior's speed. Even against the three-headed Frostwolf, lifeless Thorn had been able to keep up with the Grand Lord's attacks, but he couldn't even see the Titan warrior's afterimages. He had no doubt that he wasn't capable of dodging an attack if he were on the receiving end of that mythic monster's greatsword. Its reaction speed is quite impressive. At the very least, our reaction speed will have to be on par with a Grand Lord to block and dodge its attacks. The outcome hadn't particularly surprised Shifeng, and he continued to analyze the Titan warrior. After he tested the boss's reaction speed, he controlled the Gale Cheetah to attack the mythic monster from behind with the Tier 2 skill, Gale Blade. Numerous blades of wind assaulted the Titan warrior's backside, each dealing over -10,000 damage. The Guardian boss instantly shifted its attention to the Gale Cheetah. The Titan warrior spun around in less than half a second. It raised its weapon, cleaving down at the summoned creature. Although Shifeng had tried to direct the Gale Cheetah to circle the Titan warrior as soon as it finished its attack, he was too late. He couldn't even control the feline to defend itself in time. In the next moment, a streak of white light struck the Gale Cheetah, throwing it and devouring several millions of HP. Shifeng's doppelganger then appeared behind the Titan warrior, activating Shadow Blade. After landing a barrage of attacks, the doppelganger reclaimed the boss's aggro. After a split second, the boss tossed the doppelganger again. After repeating this process several times, the Titan warrior killed both the doppelganger and the summoned creature. After killing the trespassers, the Titan warrior calmed and returned to its original position. Everyone was stunned speechless. The Titan warrior was too fast and too powerful. Even with their life-saving skills active, this Guardian boss would likely kill Solitary 9 and Dark Madness instantly. We'll need to be roughly as fast as a Grand Lord to avoid its counterattacks. After watching the monster for some time, Shifeng had analyzed all of the Titan warrior's aspects. He then turned to his team. Although raiding this Titan warrior will be dangerous, our chances of defeating it aren't non-existent. He then pulled 10 miniature ballistas from his bag. Unfortunately, since the war weapons were precious to his guilds, he hadn't brought too many with him. War weapons. The Azura team members were dumbfounded to see the miniature ballistas. Guilds generally reserved these weapons for guild wars, yet Shifeng intended to use them to kill a monster. He had even brought 10 of these war weapons with him. Let my demon tank the Titan warrior. The rest of you will attack from 500 yards away. Try to move around and attack from behind it as much as possible, Shifeng said. He then pointed to a group of magical class players and instructed, "You 9, come to me. Each of you will take one of these scrolls and stand in these locations. When the fight begins, move within 100 yards of the boss and activate the magic array." Following which, each player began to prepare for the battle. As for Shifeng, he used the Bible of Darkness to summon a second demon. The mutated 9-star Polar Domain Magic Array should significantly lower the Titan Warrior's attributes. With 2 Tier 3 demons keeping it busy, they might just be able to kill the mythic monster. Of course, it was only a theory. Whether or not they actually succeeded would depend on the magic array's effect. If the Titan Warrior were still too powerful, he'd have no choice but to give up and wait until his team members completed their Tier 2 promotions. A moment later, everyone moved into position. Taking a deep breath, Shifeng controlled the 2 Tier 3 demons to charge at the Titan Warrior from different directions. In response, the Titan Warrior charged towards the first demon that entered its perception range as quickly as a violent gale. "Move out," Shifeng commanded. Following his commands, the 9 magical class players closed in on the Titan Warrior. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,